I would like to begin now. Is the technical team rolling? Okay, grand. Then I'd like to call this meeting to order now. And first order of business, not on the agenda, is to swear in one of our members. And fortunately, our town moderator is here and is empowered to do so. So if you would step up and swear Jonathan in, I would appreciate that. Everybody has to be sworn in every year. So even if you've
So
been
actually,
on.
Jonathan, if you raise your right hand and repeat after me, I, and state your name,
I, Jonathan Schindler,
solemnly swear to obey the laws of the town of Milton.
solemnly swear to obey the laws of the town of
I
Milton.
apologize, let's do that again. Solemnly swear to obey the bylaws of the town of Milton.
Solemnly swear to obey the bylaws of the town of Milton,
The general laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
general laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts,
And to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America.
and to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. And I'm a member of Warrant.
Yeah. Welcome back.
Yeah. I'll just clarify for the audience that we all have to do this every year, but usually we get it done as a group earlier. So, anyway, welcome everybody. We have possibly a short agenda, which might end up taking a long time, but I hope it doesn't, because we missed a meeting last week, and a lot of our discussions will be backed up into next week. But anyway, we'll see what we can do tonight. We will first have a discussion of cable coverage of this body's meetings. After that, we'll move on to a couple of articles. One, Joe Lynch will explain to us, and later on we'll have some comments from Jack Grant and Steve Marash on a fire article. After that, we might look at the prospects for fiscal year 2016 budget. So, I think I'd like to first invite Brian Walsh to the table and talk to us about the possibility of cable coverage of the Warrant Committee. And I want to recognize that we have with us, we have Bernie Lynch, the president of Milton Cable Access, and members of his board, Marvin Gordon, James Mullen, and Ella Welts. And thank you all for coming. And Michael Lynch, the executive director as well. So, before I turn it over to Brian, I just want to say maybe a couple things, and that is that it was a bit of a surprise to discover that we were thought of as a popular fodder for the airwaves, but and I think most of you know that I don't think that TV coverage is necessarily helpful to the proceedings of this deliberative body. But at any rate, I do want to acknowledge that the cable company has every legal right to tape us. Town council has certainly weighed in on that, and you know, I just want to observe that sometimes that, you know, even if you have the right to do something, it may not necessarily be the right thing to do. But at any rate, I trimmed my mustache and I put on a shirt that I like, and hope the camera will focus. So, at any rate, Brian, thank you for coming.
Thank you. So, great to see you all. This is the second time in about 2 months, right, at the kickoff meeting. So I know there's some apprehension among some members about having cable coverage of every meeting, meeting in, meeting out, with all the deliberations that you have. I think the last time I spoke with your chairman, you're talking about something like 36 meetings a year. Is that the ballpark?
Last year, and I believe we were fairly efficient, we had 33 meetings outside of the 6 town meetings. They added up to 96 hours for an average of about an average of 3 hours per meeting. So, You can fall asleep pretty easily, I think, if you're watching
So,
this.
so in any event, that is a lot of meetings. I know many of you are apprehensive about having all that TV coverage and some of your discussions. I know the Warrant Committee is a 15-member board. I guess in a perfect world, there's something around 5 members each year come on that are brand new members. There's sort of a little mentoring that happens, and as people learn, nobody wants to look stupid, and certainly nobody wants to look stupid on camera. I don't think any of you would look stupid, but I think there's this natural fear of not looking like you know what you're doing or not liking to be on camera, or et cetera. But Milton Cable has their own pressures as well, and I want you to know I did speak informally. I happened to be at another meeting with one of the members of the cable board, and spoke informally, had a nice discussion with him as Marvin Gordon, and I believe there might be a happy medium where we can provide kind of coverage of really good topics and meaty topics that the town would want to know without necessarily having to broadcast all of the meetings, so you wouldn't feel under the gun when you're having some of those mentoring discussions or procedural discussions. And so the Milton Cablevision Board is going to meet Monday at noon. I'm going to join them, and I'm going to have a discussion at length with them about it. And you know, I'm very hopeful that we will both better understand positions and be able to come back and have what will be a more palatable situation for everyone. I would say, and especially to take advantage of the fact that we have coverage tonight, you know, as moderator, I get to appoint several boards and committees. I appoint the Board of Appeals. Board of Appeals are all lawyers. They're all professionals that are accustomed. Every one of their meetings is about some very important, you know, ruling having to affect some people in the town. They're all televised. Those folks are accustomed to that. They meet nowhere near as many times as you people do. And in fact, the Board of Appeals has several members. They will assign 3 members to every case, and so they're able to divide those workloads. They don't have, for example, if that were the way you folks work, 3 of you would come in, you know, for a meeting and you'd be all set. I think there are around 9 members in total, and they wouldn't be on as much. So I certainly appointed committees that are being broadcast now, and I think it's I think it's an entirely different situation, and they're entirely comfortable with that. But the Warrant Committee, look, there's nobody that goes to town meeting that doesn't realize that this is the hardest working group in town. And I know each of you, when I was discussing your potential serving on this committee, we're well aware of that. We don't try to hide it. And there's some interesting discussions. There are a lot of people in town that have a tremendous amount to contribute, and the Warrant Committee plays a key role. I mean, you are the sort of board that peels a little bit between and behind the covers of all the budgets. You deliberate them, and you make recommendations to town meeting as to the position you think would be best for the town. So it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of concerns about the schedule, you know, how do we divide up the work, what kind of expertise do I have, what if I don't have expertise in this, and occasionally, it doesn't happen, you know, I don't know what the ratio would be, maybe 2 out of 10 people will ask me, am I going to be on camera? Is this going to be, are the meetings televised like they see the school committee or the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Appeals? And up until now, I've always said, no, it's not something you have to worry about. It'll potentially be a recruiting challenge for me or for any moderator. But again, I'm very hopeful. The members of the board here, these are all people I know well. And I'm very hopeful that we'll come to what makes the most sense for the town, for you folks. So I'd say for now, relax. My advice too, right, even tonight, is to you know, just concentrate on what you're doing and not watch the camera. I actually served in Milton School Committee when we went from, with one other gentleman at this table at the time, who was the superintendent of schools, when we went from, I think we were televised once a month to all televised. And the best advice, your joke at the beginning, Ted, is actually a good one. I can tell you I dressed differently when I knew I was going to be on the camera all the time. And it was more out of respect, right? People would expect that that's what you do. But you quickly become accustomed just to ignoring the fact that you are. I mean, we really don't have a lot to hide. We don't have anything to hide. And, but there is a tremendous amount of candid discussion I know that you folks have amongst each other, valid contrary opinions that are used during the deliberation that never see the light of day because a certain position is won over. And I don't think that those all have to see the light of day. I also know that department heads, when they come in here before you, they want to feel free to have open discussions. It could be something that they haven't fully discussed or disclosed within their own department. You just don't know, because they don't know how that's going to impact their budget, where they're going to get the money. So again, I think I'm going to have a very good discussion Monday with Milton's Cablevision board, and I think we'll land at a good place. So Ted, with your permission, you invite me to your next meeting, I'll come back and share with the outcome of that discussion.
That'd be great. I would love to hear what the cable board, if that's the correct term,
Yeah, I'm not, it's
the Milton Access TV board determines. I had thought, honestly, that the decision had been made to film us 100% of the time. That's the impression I had from Mike. And if that's not the case, then I'm delighted, because I think that kind of full blanket coverage would be problematic for some of the deliberative processes that we need to go through in order to achieve consensus on difficult stuff. So I'm delighted to hear that perhaps they're open to a different suggestion. That'd be great. And I don't know if anybody from the board would like to say anything. You're certainly welcome to. I think I saw Marvin with your hand up. Please join us at the table. We don't have that much room, but happy to have you.
So I'm Marvin Gordon, and I'm a clerk of the Milton Access TV Corporation, and have been involved in the alumnus of this board 30 years ago, and a few other boards. But I want to speak on this issue, or if it's an issue, first of all, just to give you a little history of some of what's transpired in discussions over the summer months, and why this, saying exactly what Milton Access TV is going to do relative to coverage of the Warrant Committee is slightly premature. It's premature because next Monday, which is the 8th, is Milton Access TV is going to have a board meeting which will be setting the policies of what we want to do relative to covering boards and committees as a discussion issue. Some of this has come up because, parenthetically, I'm also serving on 2 town boards, the Town Government Study Committee and the Public Works Article 17 Committee. During the summer, I attended a meeting that was attended by Brian Walsh, Katie Conlon, Anne Marie Fagan, and myself to discuss basically the scope of the Article 17 Committee, but the discussion about coverage of various town boards came up as a general topic. I personally, and I think the Milton Access TV Board feels very strongly that we want complete transparency in what goes on in the town government, including all the boards. There are some, and we've been doing a pretty good job of covering a lot of different, especially the school committee and the Board of Selectmen. There isn't one suggestion this is my personal opinion, which will be coming up, is that the town's website should have, because there's a requirement for 48 hours of posting any meeting that is required to be posted under the open meeting law. And the fact that there's going to be a meeting and that posting, which would have the agenda, and usually some of the agenda items should be on the website with that close to that 48 hours, so that not only the people who were the constituents and the people who are footing the tax bills and supporting the town institutions know whether it's an issue they're interested in or not. And this is a question that is yet to be decided, whether on the website should be a notice whether this is going to be televised or not. The discussion that I was involved in, not representing the Milton Access TV, but as a general discussion with the cast of characters that I enumerated, was on what it's going. Here, I'll put on the TV media hat. It's a ratings game. Having out, I heard 96 hours of deliberation of the Warrant Committee, a lot of which is just going over, adding up figures and discussion about budgets amongst yourself would probably be 90% of that would be very boring and would not be a good usage of our TV time, which is we have to divide up with education, government, and the public. On the public, what is of interest that hasn't been done, and that I think is one reason that I'm very strongly in favor of some Warrant Committee meetings being broadcast, is when your board is meeting with another elected or appointed town board, or their representative or chairman, usually discussing, in most cases with the Warrant Committee, discussing the budgets. And this is things that, depending on who the constituency, whether it's the school constituency or the public safety and so forth, these are issues that the public is interested in. And when the board is involved in a discussion with them, I think that that's, personally, I think that that's something that, especially if it's got advanced publicity with a meeting being posted, that it's going to be televised, will have a lot of viewers who historically over the last 30 years have not been privy to what's really how the town government is working. So having TV coverage of when you're meeting with a board or with a town employee who is an executive or in an executive or a managerial position, which will also be talking about the board, about their budget and how what they think that should happen to their budget and how it affects the town services and the services to our community. Having that on TV is great for viewership.
Sure.
Increases our ratings parenthetically, and is a very good arena for the warrant committee members to express their opinion and ask questions of the town officials, the town boards, especially when you're meeting with the planning board, when zoning issues come up, which are usually a hot button items. They have this discussion back and forth rather than it being a surprise at the town meeting as to what the pros and cons are. It's going to be a very great service to the community. So they're televising it. We basically, at my suggestion, that we ask for an opinion from the town council, which says that basically, if it's covered by the open meeting law, the Milton Cable has the right to televise it. And it's not just the right, also, in my opinion, I think it's what the populace of all our constituents deserve to have happen, so they can see exactly how the town government is working. So this is premature because on next Monday, and I believe Brian informed me that he is coming to the meeting of Milton Access TV next Monday. Next Monday, we'll be voting policies. I hope we'll be voting some policies. I'm only speaking for myself, and I'll be making motions along the lines that I just discussed. But what that decision will be and how the scheduling issues are handled will be the kind of issues that will be decided. And personally, it's not if the board votes that they want to televise 96 hours, then you're going to have 96 hours televised. But personally, I think that's bad for our ratings and not productive, whereas having the kind of television coverage that I touched on, just when you're talking to the other portions of town government, will be a big plus both for the town and for everybody.
Are you making a distinction in?
Lee, I want to interrupt you, and I know we're all new here, but generally, I decide who talks. So if you can raise your hand,
Sure.
And you too, Frank, then what I do is I try and keep track of who's in the queue
Okay.
for commentary. And so sorry for that interruption. But anyway, if you do have a moment to listen to Lee Michael's question, that would be grand.
Are you making a distinction between what meetings will be recorded and what meetings will be televised? Or do you mean to say that you're only going to record and televise some meetings? I'm wondering if the cameras will always be here and always be on and always be recording.
That is, as I said, it's a little premature because we haven't made any decisions on the MATV level, whether we would be recording it for later playing for every meeting, or whether we would be just doing the meetings of the kind that where there's an interaction with other town boards or other town officials and so forth, which because looking at it not only as a ratings person looking at the who's going to be watching, but also as a budget person looking at the budget for MATV, it doesn't, producing anything costs money. We have to have people and we devote resources, and we're taking up airtime. So we want to do what's going to be most productive and most of interest to the community. My personal opinion is that we won't be, my recommendation will be that we not be recording except when we have these meetings, when you have the category of interaction that I talk about. Whether the board, majority of the board feels they want to televise everything or not, it's not for me to say, but that's what, I'm well, Bernie Lynch, who's here tonight, is the chairman of MATV, and he's the longest serving president, and is the longest serving member, and I'm basically the second. It seems like I just got on that board yesterday because the years fly by, and I'm the second longest serving member, and Frank's the treasurer of MATV, and we've come a long way, and this roughly 90% of the households in this town are connected either through Comcast or what's the other one? RCN. And so that's the way to get the communication to everybody, and what the decision is going to be, whether it's 100% or just a certain percentage, I can't say, but that will be determined after. But some are going, there's no question that some are going to be televised. And I think it will be a step forward in that regard.
Okay, well, I'm sure we could probably help you choose the warrant committee's greatest hits, you know, but Betty, you have a question?
I was just wondering, Marvin, if your board is considering televising other boards and committees, like I'm just wrote down the Housing Authority, the Library Board of Trustees, the board that meets on the Council of Aging issues, the Board of Health, the Board of Assessors, the Park Department, Commissioners, the Historical Commission, all those other boards and committees.
Well, we are now doing the Board of Appeals, which every once in a while they have a hot button issue, but most of the time I've had comments from listeners and viewers that most of the time it's like watching grass grow. So, some of these other boards, if they have public interest issues, I think we should be doing where we have the opportunity. But here again comes the decision tree, which parenthetically you asked Mike Lynch to be here tonight to probably discuss the TV things, but he works under the policies that are set by the board. And so the decision makers of what gets televised and what doesn't will be board policies. But on lots of nights there are a lot more. I think there's 3 meetings tonight, and to get the personnel and devote the resources to do it is a judgment call, and that can be the president's decision, or if there's which ones get cut out and what isn't cut out. But if I were just looking at it as a media person, I would say which ones are going to have the greatest ratings. And which ones have the greatest ratings are the ones that have the biggest public interest in the town. So you've named a lot of boards, and if the Historical Commission, which is an appointed board, but it's still an important board, if the Historical Commission has an issue that would be of great interest, for instance, right now they're in interaction with the Board of Selectmen on the Swift hat factory. That has a lot, and especially in that side of town, there's a lot of public interest in that. And if they were going to have a meeting with the Board of Selectmen or whatever, my opinion, it should be televised. most of the time, if it's just routine meetings that have nothing of great public interest, then it won't be televised. But putting the agenda, everything that's a posted meeting on our website will in the first instance tell you what, by the number of telephone calls you get, whether there is a public interest in it, and secondly, give the people in town notice that there's an issue, or that when it's on the agenda, that there's something that would be of interest to them. Right now, 90% of the people in town don't know about a lot of these issues, what the zoning issues are, what the cemetery board issues are, and so forth, until they read it in the warrant. So,
Kevin?
Yeah, hi Marvin. I appreciate you coming tonight, and I think everyone does. And personally, I hope we'll be able to find some middle ground on this. But I'd really like it if you could explain to me if the decision to create a policy about this topic is going to be made Monday. Why was our last meeting filmed and shown on TV, and why is this meeting being filmed?
the answer to that is partially my fault, because I didn't know that the last meeting of the MATV, which was an ad hoc meeting, was not a regularly scheduled meeting, was going to be discussing this issue, because I already told you I had heard and what the Board of PS, this board is, the MATV board is a semi-independent board. It is not governed by the open meeting law, and it's financially independent, but it exists by virtue of a contract with the Board of Selectmen, who award the community cable franchise to, in this case, into MATV. But if they didn't, so we're not appointed by the Board of Selectmen, but MATV exists because of the contract with the Board of Selectmen. So what the Board of Selectmen feel is obviously very important, and as I told you, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, as well as the town moderator and the town administrator, were in spite of the original feeling that the Warrant Committee didn't have to be televised, I pointed out to all of the above that this is the law, and the opinion of the town council is that if it's a board that is subject to the open meeting law, that we have the MATV has the right, with notice to the chairman, has the right to televise it. So to get back to your question, I didn't know that the first ones were being televised, and if I had known, I would have asked for an emergency meeting of the MATV board to put it off until we have a policy on it. Now, where it came from to do it, there had been discussion, a lot of it initiated by myself, that the Warrant Committee and the Planning Board and some of the other boards, when something comes up, even the Council of Aging and et cetera, there are times when they need to be televised. And so whether that was taken by the bit and run with without further decision-making at the board level, I don't know.
Thank you. Did you have a question, Paul?
I do.
Sir.
Mr. Gordon, I'm just, because I'm ignorant of this. Your board is not subject to open meeting law, so I'm just curious, how does your board come into being? How do you become a member of your board?
Okay, I can give you a very, I hope I can be briefer than I've been so far, but I can give you a very brief rundown on that. The state of Massachusetts passed laws that in order to in the legislature, in order to encourage and finance local community access television on for both the public, the educational side, and Milton Cable is doing a fabulous job in the school department, and Frank can tell you more about that, and the town government side. And they passed a rule that every community could ask the local cable company or companies to devote a negotiable, but within a certain range, a negotiable percentage of their revenue of their cable subscribers that would be payable to the governing board of the town, in our case, the Board of Selectmen. So we get a certain percentage, correct me if I'm wrong, is it 2.5%? 4%. Of Comcast's revenue, not of their shopping channels, but their regular broadcast channels. We get a percentage of their revenue, which the selectmen cannot just, they have to spend it towards the cable-related or informational or capital expenditures for the cable company. For instance, this room has been wired now and set up, which it wasn't previously, for cable, and this is not cheap. Doing the selectmen's room, it was like $30,000, right?
Maybe been higher, yeah. Maybe
And
50,000.
And we've invested,
How much? 40,000.
we've invested a lot of money in the Pierce School studio and a lot of money in the high school, where kids have the opportunity to have hands-on experience with media. So the money is generated from the cable revenue. The selectmen are a conduit to it, but they have the right of holding it back until they see what our budget is. They don't, and where we're going to spend the budget, but they can't put it anyplace else except through something that's related to the cable expenditure. So that's how we start. That's a long answer, but it's how we started. Was the legislature created a vehicle. It varies from town to town what percentage they're getting, but it's all within a range, and that percentage is a negotiated figure, not between MATV, but between the Board of Selectmen and Comcast and the others.
Well,
So I think the
follow-
question,
yes.
please, go ahead.
Yeah,
Paul.
actually, my question was, our board comes into being because the town moderator appoints us. How does your board come into being? Who appoints you, or who elects you, or who selects you? What's the mechanism,
Well,
please?
part of it is self-perpetuating board, but also we have one member who's appointed by the school department. And
Becky
what-
Badera at the
who
moment.
was,
And Dennis Cohen is the.
Dennis is the representative of the Board of,
Is the Board of Selectmen's.
yeah.
representative.
Before Dennis was on, none of the selectmen had been on, they hadn't made an appointment, but the the school department had an assistant superintendent. Now they have one of the school committee members on our board. And other than that, that's where
So who appoints everybody else?
they,
How does everybody else come? So you've got one representative from the selectmen, you have a representative from the school
yeah,
committee, so.
the other members have to have been devoting a certain amount of service to the cable through being volunteers or other kinds of service to the cable, and we have like a general membership pool that the board can pick, if there's a vacancy, can pick succeeding members. But
So,
believe me, the you know, what this results is a contract with the Board of Selectmen, so that I don't have to say anything more.
no, basically, they're a regular not-for-profit company, and their president can help, can choose who he would like to have be on his board, is pretty much the simple answer to that.
Okay.
And, Mike, you have a question?
Well, my point, I guess, was already addressed by Paul. It was like, it seemed like we got
Great.
off the topic
Yes.
of what the question was.
All right.
But maybe I'll, at risk of looking stupid in my first thing, what I've heard so far is that we have a legal obligation to be recorded all the time. That's the law. And the only thing that will govern is there's some editorial function that someone has to execute to keep 96 hours of television from being deadly boring. But there's a problem the town has. There's a lack of knowledge among the citizenry about what's going on. There's a lack of knowledge of people who are in town meeting about what's going on. So all I want to say is I have no experience of being on the warrant committee. I've heard that many bad things have happened in the government since transparency became the rage. Governments seem to work less well. But I think, if that's the law, we have to give it a shot, and we can hope that there's some lemonade made out of this lemon, that some of the more experienced people here seem to feel there'll be problems because we have constant television coverage. So maybe if the cable has this money, they can pay somebody to thoughtfully edit what is broadcast to increase their ratings and perform the function of educating the citizenry. That's rather than just put everything out there. I wanted to say that because you're going to have a policy. And
May I respond to this just
Please.
very briefly?
Please.
The editing content is, if we're covering a government board, it's got to be covered in its entirety. It's not the position, not like a newspaper that can decide whether it's going to have a conservative slant or a liberal slant or whatever. What's there is going to be broadcast. The decision-making is what you are going to broadcast and what you're not going to broadcast. If you're going to broadcast it, you broadcast it in its entirety.
then,
Right.
if I can respond to that.
Please,
then
but I just
if that's
wanna-
a requirement, and I don't want to break a law, fine. If it all has to go out there, what we really need is someone to summarize what's been done.
Michael, can you hang on just a second? I don't think we're in any danger of having the cable company look at a 3-hour meeting and go, oh, let's chop this piece out and let's chop that piece out. I think all Mr. Gordon was saying was that if they're going to film one 3-hour meeting, then they will broadcast the entire 3-hour meeting with no editing. Okay? So the editing function is to choose which meeting to tape and then broadcast. I think that's
All right,
what he was
but the point I was
talking
trying to make,
about.
and like I said, I'm the
Sorry.
most junior member here
No, not at
practically,
all.
but it's that the need of the citizenry to understand what's going on is probably a summary.
I imagine
And I
that
guess
will-
the function of, someone will, the newspapers might do that, but
I imagine
I was
that I will
hoping
be
Milton
doing a
Cable
lot
would.
of summarization.
right.
And, what can I say? I hope not too much, but that
okay, thanks.
seems to be the part of the territory. Frank?
Make a suggestion that we have Mike Lynch
Sorry.
explain how he does this, and so that you feel a little more comfortable. As we've discussed, this room is wired and the camera's up there. I don't think the cable company's interested in getting a photo of a person speaking and so forth. And he might be able to discuss that and maybe put us at ease a little bit, if that's okay with you. I'd suggest that Mike speak.
Okay, that would be grand. Richard, did you have something for Mr. Gordon before?
Just two comments.
Sure.
Just my comment is, Marv, everything you said, it does sound really good, and I do think it's probably the right thing to do. I would just echo, I think, what Kevin said before, that hopefully there could be some common ground, so this will be my third year on the committee. I know not nearly as much as a lot of people that have done this. And I think the 90-something hours this past year that you did was very efficient, because I think the year before we had even more than that. There was probably many more meetings than 30-something. So that's maybe a good average. But my comment would be on the good TV, the points that the town might really like to see. I can look over the last 2 years and probably, like most people on this committee that's been here a few years, really pick out some really good for TV moments. But my thought would be is those things never would have happened if they were on TV, only because the person at that end of the table might be an elected official, and we might be asking them some really hard questions that we might not ask in front of a television camera, and they sure as heck won't answer in front of a TV camera. So I would just say, hopefully, along with Kevin's comment, that there could be some concessions made, just because I think the town gets a lot of value out of us asking those really tough questions.
Great. So to follow up on Frank's suggestion, Mike, there are some technical questions I think people have, and I've got a couple. For instance, how close do these cameras zoom in? How do I get you to stop filming if I want to take a break? Things like that. And I don't know, any other questions people might have? Sure. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to introduce myself, I am Mike Lynch. I'm the Executive Director of Milton Access TV. And I'm here to answer any technical questions you may have.
Great. How do I get you to stop taping if I want to take a recess?
So I did check about the issue of recess, and we do have those frequently at town meeting. So what we will do is I assume that you motion for recess, and you take a vote from your committee members, and when you go into recess, we stop the tape. And when
So that means somebody is there all the time?
Correct.
Okay.
So we would stop the tape at a recess. You can have your recess, and when you call the meeting back to order is when we would start to film again. Our crew is always here. We're in a little different situation that we do not have a control room, so our crew is always in the back. I might be anticipating your next question about our crew being in the room when you're in recess. If it's an open meeting and the public is here, it's here. If you do motion to go into executive session, we do stop the tape. Our crew will leave the room, because I know that you have to close the doors, and we just ask that you kindly let us know when your executive session's over, and we'll come back in.
I hope never to declare executive session. At any rate, do these cameras have zoom lenses?
They do.
They do.
So we do have.
So I'm your new matinee idol. I mean, how does this work? Which cameras have the zooms?
They all do.
They all do.
So
Can't
to let
hide.
you
Okay.
to let you know, there are 4 cameras in the room. They are placed in the ceiling throughout the room. We do work with committees, so we do understand the concern of close-ups of people, and we're not in the business of doing close-ups of people on individual committees. We don't have to do that. The cameras are set up right now that they can cover one complete side of the table. So we do have 4 sides. We can cover all 4. Right now, the cameras are on 4 wide shots to cover the 4 people sitting on each side of the table. We do have a wide shot, and a wide shot is when we cover the entire group, and that's the back camera that's above the clock, and that's what we use when you would take a vote. We're new to filming the warrant committee, so we would need to just know how you do vote. I assume it's just like every other committee, so once you motion for vote, we'd zoom out and capture the whole committee, but other than that, I mean, they're here, they can zoom in and out, but we understand the concern. If we don't want close-ups, we don't have to do close-ups.
Shucks. Okay. Anybody have any questions for Mike? Richard?
I guess you might have already answered this, but I'll ask it anyway. So I think you said that person, if there's somebody back, what if there's, so some of our meetings, I mean, we've crept on midnight a few times. If there's somebody sitting there, then we're probably on. If somebody isn't there, then are we to believe that the cameras are off?
So I might have to answer your question a little out of order, but I do have to clarify that, in answer to Mr. Sorgi's question, that I did present to my board the issue of covering our warrant committee. The board did take a vote, and that's why I've been here in August, and that's why I am here tonight. We do have the issue, again, scheduled for our next meeting where the moderator will be attending, but that's why we're here. So it's under my impression that going forward, we will be filming your meeting. So if we start a meeting to film it, we will be here till the end. Once you call the meeting to order, we don't stop until you adjourn. So we do, I know it's a lot of late nights, so I'm not excited about it. I don't know what the staff really is, but we'll be here till the end.
Kevin?
Yeah, Mike, I'm not sure you appreciate why some of us might be a little reluctant to have every meeting broadcast. Do you have some understanding of that?
I do.
Okay. So you understand that when we volunteered to serve on this committee, or were asked to serve, it was with the understanding that while the public was going to be invited, the meetings were not on TV. So this is a change in midstream. And let me just ask you, was it your decision to bring the warrant committee to the board's attention?
It was, and to back up my decision to bring it to the board, we have had over the past, I've been with MPEG now for 5 years, I'd say every year, and especially this past year, we've probably had in the ballpark of maybe 40 to 50 requests for copies of your meeting. So we provide a service to the community where we allow people to purchase copies of a selectmen's meeting or a school committee meeting, whatever we cover. So we've been getting multiple requests of people saying, you know, hey, I didn't make it to last night's warrant committee meeting, can I purchase a copy of it? And that's really where it started. When I have, you know, people calling in requesting it, I can bring it to the board's attention. The board then takes action on it.
Okay, thanks.
So that was, just to clarify, 40 to 50 requests last year?
At least.
At least. Do we have any other questions for Mike at the moment? I am, so basically, just to clarify, the answer to, you know, why now is that there's an increasing demand for DVDs of our meetings?
Yes.
As opposed to, say, 5 years ago?
5 years ago when I first started, I wasn't the director. I really can't report on that. I can tell you that when we came on board, it was a staff of 1. It was just myself. And when we built our studio, it was myself, and we've slowly built up our staff, and we've slowly built up our equipment, and we've slowly built out multiple rooms around town, this being one of them.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for Mike? Lee Michael.
Is there any way to know which camera is on at any given time?
Unfortunately, no. They're all on, and the way our setup works is that all 4 cameras go into a switcher. So chances are the member that is speaking, the camera is on that side of the table. And like I said before, when you go to a vote, it would be a wide shot. If there's a, you know, general discussion going on, it's a kind of an action pace, you know, fast meeting, then we might have just one camera on covering it all, but unfortunately, there really is no way to tell which one's on. I can just say that the way the staff is trained, that if someone is speaking on one side of the table, that side of the table would be on camera.
Great. Does anybody have any further questions at the moment? We will put the subject of cable coverage on the agenda again when we hear from either the Milton Access or our moderator directly as to what we can expect. So presumably Monday or Wednesday of next week. So we'll have another opportunity if we want to devote any more time to this. Okay? And other than that, thank you, everybody from Milton Access for coming. I don't know if you wanted to address any remarks while you're here beyond what's been said, but you'd be welcome to. And other than that, I hope you have a productive and satisfying deliberation next Monday.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
thanks, Mike. Okay. So we're running a little late already. The next order of business is to hear about our first article for fall town meeting, and that is the one that Mr. Lynch will, the Director of the Department of Public Works, will help us understand. And the article itself doesn't say much at the moment. Glad you could come.
Thank you.
Joe came on very short notice because we had to scramble for a new schedule after last week's difficulties. So we're very happy to get a couple of discussions in tonight. This is about the only thing we know is that it's storage tanks, and then we also read in the paper that it's could be a big ticket.
It's much more than storage tanks. It's capital improvements to the high service area, including 3 storage tanks, 1 pressure reducing vault, and the hardware in that vault, and pipeline upgrades and improvements along the high service corridor. Total project cost, just to put it in perspective as the discussion unfolds going back, is $6.031 million. Pretty much broken out of 2.8 million in water main replacement, 2.3 million in, these are construction numbers, in the storage tank, and 300,000 in the PRV vault and hardware in that system. What that all comes down to, and I'm sure many of you have followed this issue for the past several years. Back in 2007, the town of Milton challenged the town of Canton with regards to its water system, and an allegation made publicly that Canton was stealing water from us. And that didn't rub well in Canton. What came out of that was a settlement, through a legal settlement, between the two towns, and it obligated Canton to make certain capital improvements within a certain window of time. Canton did all of those, and 3 years ago, reported to Milton for the first time, we are now ready to shut you off. They did what they needed to do, ironically enough, about $7 million in capital work on their end, including tanks and pipelines and things that they had to do. To which Milton, again, this wasn't even on the surface or the radar when I came aboard here. This was all stuff that was happening behind the scenes that nobody told us about. And I said to my colleagues in Canton, well, you can't do that to us. You will cripple the town. It won't be able to fight fires, won't be able to provide water supply to many households, several hundred households on the high elevations of town during the summer months and periods of high demand. And in the case of a water main break, even in the wintertime, I wouldn't be able to provide water to those houses as well. We sat and opened up that dialogue with Canton Board of Selectmen and Milton Board of Selectmen, where Town Council and I, on behalf of Milton, and their council and their Board of Selectmen hammered out an agreement which gave us until November of 2016 to complete our capital improvements and it's a very, very lengthy document. That was debated publicly, Board of Selectmen, for the past year, as that was unfolding and we were giving reports, publicly to the selectmen at their meetings. That was culminated in an agreement that was signed and executed. 13 January of this year, and that was after 9 months of hammering out a deal. What it really does is it leaves an adequate window of time for Milton to continue to enjoy the benefits of that water that loops. It's our water that loops through Canton's pipes out in that corner of town, which is what balances our system to be able to maintain water elevation in our storage tanks and a freshness of water. And I didn't even get to the point of talking about the water quality issues, which are almost secondary when it comes to the fire flow issues. But it allows the water to circulate through that corner of Canton, and in essence, takes our MWRA feed from meter 55 and balances the tank, one tank on Big Blue and the two tanks in Chickatobit, and it allows that circulation in that less populated, less densely populated and less populated areas of town, but nonetheless needs to maintain that redundancy and circulation of water between those tanks. So we hammered out a deal with very, very strict timetables mapped right out in it, and one of those timetables were that we would conduct our hydraulic model. We would do a master plan of a high service area based on that model and our needs. We would then look at the infrastructure that we had. The thought being, we were going to probably still rely on Canton's pipes and have to hammer out some other deal where we would either buy their pipes or lay our own pipe in their line, in their town and their roadways. But in the process of us doing our hydraulic model and our analysis, what we found was we were much better served by making upgrades to our own system in our own community and completely divorce ourselves from the Canton situation forevermore. When I say forevermore, 1957 is when the first agreement between Canton and Milton went into place. It was perfectly all well and good until 2007, until someone decided to rock the boat. And in the process of rocking it, ostensibly capsized us. So what we've done is, in living up to the executed agreement, we have completed the hydraulic model, we've completed the master plan, we've already completed the preliminary designs, we're at 90% design, we've submitted them to our Board of Selectmen, to their Board of Selectmen, to show that we're living up to those timetables. The very next timetable is we have until December of 1, 2014, to have an article come before town meeting to authorize the borrowing to undertake this project. And that's what this article is all about, and that's why we're here this evening. If we fail to bring it to town meeting, they shut us off. No questions asked. If we bring it to town meeting and the article fails at town meeting, they shut us off. This is not a comfortable thing to say, but I don't mince words. We have until November of 2016 to complete all of our infrastructure work, which gives us about a 9-month window of cushion to be able to actually do it with what we've got planned right now, designs. And what that includes is replacement of 3 tanks. There's 2 on Chickatobit Hill. The one's a 650,000 gallon tank, the other's a 150,000 gallon tank. We are going to replace the 2 with 1. Hydraulic grade lines, I don't want to get too technical, but hydraulically they're going to function exactly as they have been, and the number of gallons will be the same. We'll be occupying a lesser footprint by combining them into a single structure. And when you get right down to it, you also make the ease of constructing that replacement easier, because we can actually take the one smaller tank, the large tank out of line, build the new one, leaving the second tank in place, and then when the first tank is done, take that other one out. So it allows us to maintain our water integrity and of pressure and firefighting and our water quality throughout the construction process. So it's to replace those 2 tanks with 1. Both of those tanks are 80 years old, riveted steel, and we're going to be replacing them with a single a bolted steel jacked system that has an epoxy outside on it. The third tank is over in Big Blue. It's a single tank. It's a 600,000 gallon tank. It's of the exact same vintage. They all went in this, within years of each other. That one, we're still in the midst of, the thought at this point is to look to replace that in its entirety as well, because we've looked at the life cycle replacement of doing a rehab that would require some deferred, some continued maintenance every 5 years. And we look at it on a life cycle basis, and we're really, really close to the value of rehabbing a tank with 80 years of life already gone out of it with these recurring costs versus the capital outlay initially, just have a brand-new tank and to carry that through. What we are doing on the further analysis on that is we're doing some corrosion testing, in which checking the integrity of the wall itself to really understand because that could easily be a tiebreaker. If we've got any levels of high corrosion, I don't mean rust, I mean, thinning of walls and whatnot, that would tip the hands clearly that it has to be replaced. The number that we're asking for is under the presumption that the tank is going to be replaced. We will know the answer of whether we're going to rehab that third tank or replace it by the time town meeting convenes. We will know that answer.
So I have a lot of questions. The first, and you're next, Betty. The first question would be, do you have any documents you can share with us? We're a little précis of the work entailed.
I mean, short notice, I can certainly get you all of those. I can get you the executive summary.
Not tonight, but
Oh, sure.
whoever's going to be writing the commentary up for about 2 weeks is going to need that kind of thing.
Sure.
And I guess my next question would be along the lines of, okay, we signed this agreement on the 13th of January, and we didn't do anything about it at Springtown meeting because it was too late to put an article in.
That's correct. And in fact, our hydraulic model in our capital plan was already in an RFP form in March of 13. So that was already well underway. And what we're looking at now is strictly design, construction services, and construction costs for capital. All of the analysis and stuff we've done internally, within the confines of our own existing water capital on a year-to-year basis.
Okay, so I have Betty, and then Steve, and then Frank, and then Kevin. So here we go.
Hi, Joe. I was wondering, with the discussion with the Board of Selectmen, are you thinking about bonding this expense over a number of years, or?
Yes, they're gonna float a bond. The question that I believe has been drafted is the authorization to borrow. Is the number 5.4?
Well, that was what was reported in the newspaper. We don't have anything beyond that.
Yeah, it should be
I don't even
it
know
should
where
be
the newspaper
5.4.
got that. Maybe Ken could tell us, I don't know.
Yeah, the kind of a question that you had alluded to is what other pockets might we tap into? The total project cost to get it from where we are today to the completion is closer to 6.031 million. But the authorization to borrow we're looking for is 5.4. We have the ability within the structure of our existing water capital system to not borrow again, to do this other work. This type of pipeline work is what we would do in other parts of town anyway, so we're going to be doing it simply in the high service area.
Great, so this is entirely on the town's books then? This is not going to the ratepayer, the water and sewer ratepayers?
Of course it is.
It is?
That's how the bond gets paid.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
debt service gets paid through the ratepayer,
Okay,
absolutely.
great.
Not through the enterprise.
Well, yes, through the
It's the
enterprise.
same question, same answer.
So,
Thank you.
okay. So
Debt service is a line within the enterprise.
this is going to be a significant impact on your ratepayers? Can you?
We haven't calculated what the impact is because we don't know whether we're gonna be bonding, one of the other decisions is if this third tank becomes a rehabilitation instead of replacement, you can only bond the rehabilitation, we understand, for between 10 and 15 years, maybe 15 years max. where on the replacement of a tank, I believe they can bond it as long as 40. The town may choose not to. So the capital planning committee is actually doing debt service schedules to understand what our options would be, and working with bond counsel to understand that, to be able to minimize that impact on the rates, and also recognizing when our existing bonds with the MWRA and other water borrowings, when they come due and they're completed or expiring, we can simply roll those monies over and also minimize the impacts.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, full disclosure here. I work for the Commonwealth and I'm the director of the program that primary program that finances water and sewer projects in the state. So if the discussion veers into whether the town's going to apply for that or not, I'm going to have to recuse myself. However, I have a couple of questions more to the how did we get here element, and Joe, they may not be ones you can answer. It might be questions that the selectmen need to answer. But with this in the works, as I recall, we reduced the water rates last year to return a little bit of money to everybody. And I'm wondering why we didn't use some foresight and just set that money aside for this rather than reducing the rate, and then we're going to have to increase the rate even more to make that up if we're capitalizing it. The other question is, are there other areas of town similarly situated where we get water from or through another community? It strikes me that if we and Canton had discussed this rationally, they wouldn't have spent 7 and we wouldn't be spending 6 to do what we could have done cooperatively for some
Sure.
significantly lower amount, and that is not a mistake that we should make twice.
Sure. Steve, I'd like to, if I can answer those in order. First of all, you and I have worked with the SRF, and I, the disclosure isn't for my purpose, it's probably for the public, but, I know what your job is, and we work, you and your agency and us have worked well, and not so much in Milton, but in my other parts of my career. With regards to other parts of town, there are no other parts of town that are served in a way anywhere near like this. We receive our water from the MWRA from 3 separate revenue metering locations, meter 127, 107, 27, and meter 55. 107 and 27 are low-pressure systems. It comes off the southern spine. Without getting too technical, it's a much lower pressure, and therefore it only serves the lower elevations of town. Meter 55 comes off of Metropolitan Avenue, and it serves the higher elevations up in the Blue Hills area and those remote areas where it's difficult to circulate water. The two things happened in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And one thing was the Bellevue pump station from the MWRA came online, and they raised the hydraulic grade line by 25 feet. And in raising the grade line, again, not getting too technical, but with tanks, you want tanks, just like you get up in the morning, you run the faucet a little bit before you get a drink of water because you want that fresh water. Tanks holding 1 million gallons need to be turned over on a regular basis or they get stale, and when they get stale, if the water ages, when it ages, the chlorine burns out of it, and you have water quality issues, including contamination. So you want tanks to turn over. Somewhere, some time, when the MWRA put Bellevue online, someone in Milton should have said, hey, foul, my tanks aren't turning over anymore, you can't do that to us. Nobody ever said that, to my knowledge. Long time ago.
When,
Late 90s, early 2000s, long time ago, 15, 20 years ago. Subsequent to that, in the whole time, by the way, since 1957, Canton was looking to grow that part of town with this was in 1957, the foresight, when 128 was still 128 and not the highway that it is today, or even anything like that. But they were looking to grow their industrial component in that northern part of their town, and they had no ability to do that. They struck a deal with Milton back then to allow that they would install their piping system and buy water from us at a wholesale rate, which was all well and good until we threatened the action because of an allegation of theft of water, which was never proven out. What came of that was a new agreement in 2007 where we sold Canton water at a retail rate. What you guys are paying as a tier 1, 2, or 3, or 4 customer, they were, because of their volume, they were a tier 4 customer, and they were paying the retail rate. They were our biggest customer. But also recognizing that they were in a hard position, and they were very motivated, to Steve's point, of why Canton was motivated to get off the line. It wasn't hydraulics, it was money, and nothing more than money. Their rate, coincidentally, the rate that they charge their customers at their highest tier is actually more than what we were charging them. So they were even making money on our water. That aside. They did what they needed to do. They were motivated. They built their tanks. They expanded their system, and they got online. And up to 3 years ago was when they notified us that they're ready to turn us off. What that meant was reconnecting their pipes that they put in 1957, in the late 50s, and shut off those valves at Milton, and our ability to feed our water through their pipes into our system would go away. So that's how it happened. There is no turning that back. The whole angst of negotiating this agreement with Canton is, no pun intended, it's water under the bridge, and it is ill will between the communities. There's no question about it. We attempted all kinds of solutions to make amends and to see what we could do, and they would hear nothing of it. They had already made their investment in the system. They were ready to be on their own and have their own water at a much lower wholesale cost and still continue to have their retail rate much more profitable. So that's the background of it. Recognizing that any new pipe that we would lay in the Canton area, in the Blue Hills, we would be hammering through solid rock all the way out. The cost of trench ledge was just prohibitive, as opposed to replacing existing pipes within our, segments of existing pipes within our own system, within our own trenches that are already there. Those ledge costs would go away, and in the essence, we would still be looking at an aged water question because of the lack of circulation to move stuff up, not so much on Big Blue, but up in the chick tanks, which is the biggest volume of water. We wouldn't be able to move the water through without making the tank replacements and those piping improvements. The PRV valve that we're putting in is taking that hydraulic grade line problem that the MWRA should have addressed 15 or 20 years ago. And PRV is pressure reducing valve, for those who may not know. And in times of lower demand, lower demand within our system, we're able to throttle down the pressure coming from them, allowing our tanks to turn over, to use some water at night, and then during periods of high demand, allow them to fill back up and turn again. So we're going to be able to throttle it with that to give us our water quality. So by doing what we're doing, we're going to be completely self-sufficient within our own community. We're going to have replaced 3 of our 80-year-old tanks, which are really well on the verge of obsolescence and deterioration, and maintain our fire flows, which are right now still solid because the tanks aren't turning over. But if Canton were to turn it off, it would be completely compromised. And lastly, would be improving water quality by the ability to turn the tanks over on a regular basis. So those are the things we're looking to accomplish. And the analysis in the design in 2 years' worth of effort of us and our consultants has concluded that. And that's what we're bringing it to the town meeting. It's what we're bringing to the town meeting. It's what Canton has forced us to do. It's things we probably ought to have been considering doing for the past 15 years, but weren't.
The other question was the race to rebate everybody $12 instead of saving that money. What thought process went on there?
Politics. I can't say anything more than that. I mean, I come in on what we didn't know we still don't even know what a debt service cost will be for the first year. We don't know what it will be until we go to construction. Could we have saved some more money? Well, I think you're going to see, if you haven't already talked about it, there's an article coming in for establishing officially the enterprise funds. We would always be dealing with fund balance and not pure enterprise. Speaks to your SRF eligibility question, because we're not enterprise. It's why we're trying to get it on, so we can go to the markets that are out there. Because my understanding is we wouldn't be eligible to borrow into the period, unless we are enterprise for water.
Call me at the office.
Okay, so I have Frank, and then I have Kevin, and then Richard, and then Jean. And I just wanted to clarify on the subject that Steve brought up, the rebate out of the unreserved fund balances of the water and sewer enterprise that went through last fall was a total of $400,000. So it would have been handy, I presume, to have that as seed money for this project, but we don't. So, Frank, you're up.
Yeah. And my concern really is that $13 million being spent by the taxpayers for no good reason. 6 for us and 7 for them. And we're talking about the Canton, Massachusetts, and Milton, Massachusetts. We're not talking about Canton, Afghanistan. I mean, can't we get this to, someone to get this together so that we have to spend this money if we don't have to? I mean,
That would have been
it just seems to me
that would have been a great conversation to have in 2007,
Yep.
prior to the allegation
I
being
can't
made.
imagine the town meeting enjoying this discussion, that 13 million basically is wasted because people couldn't get to talk to each other.
I mean,
It'd be hard for me to vote for it.
I mean, there's adversarial blood there, and if anything, the recent activity has cured some of that, but it's not going to cure anywhere near all of it.
Do we have legislators involved at all?
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, there are no state
The-
laws
the-
that would come in and
the-
help
the-
us with this?
The motion had been put, the plan had been put in motion on Canton's end in great haste in 2007, and they had already started running the race. There was no way to pull them back. They had already completed their work. They completed their work 3 years ago. So,
So Canton basically felt abused by our billing and decided to be quit of us, and now we're holding the short end of the
there's
stick.
another,
But I just want to point out to Frank, it's not 13 million, I mean, it's 13 million between the two towns.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's a component here on the tanks anyway that, would probably have to be spent at some point anyway for
Anyway.
replacement.
All right.
that's correct.
So, it's not a complete, a waste of resource, but, and there is some advantage to be had, I suppose, in having full independence and being able to solve the problem that was not of Canton's making of the water quality issues and being able to turn over the water.
I'm just gonna go there. Thank you very much, Ted. The reality is, there's a whole bunch of operational things that just makes more sense. Nobody wants to be responsible for supplying our water through their pipes to their customers, and we own the liability right up to that first tap in their house. Even though they're Canton customers, though I have no access and no control of their water quality, I'm responsible for it. So there's a whole bunch of, we don't flush their hydrants. They don't flush their own hydrants because it's our water. There's a whole bunch of stuff that just doesn't make sense operationally. And we're not about to compromise water quality, so because of this aged water question, what do? We dump tanks on a recurring basis in wintertime to turn the tanks over. That's wasteful. So over time, there's going to be some operational savings by using less water, from the MWRA on a wholesale basis. So there's a whole bunch of logical operational issues. There's some very clear hydraulic benefits to this. And sure, it's unfortunate that we need to outlay the money. But in the end, at least we're getting some value in our system, unto ourselves, in our own community. And it's going to give us reliance for decades to come.
Kevin?
Hi, Joe. You hired a consultant for this work? Who was the consultant?
It was the Beta Group. It was a RFP. We probably had half a dozen respondents to it.
How much did they cost?
Oh, I don't have those.
Roughly, just roughly.
Well, there were several different components. Allow me to correct myself if I'm wrong. I'm going to say about $250,000
Right, now
for the hydraulic model and the,
where did that money come from?
we took that out of water capital money that we build within our rates on a recurring basis every year. That's a non-borrowing line, which means we simply did less water main work last year to be able to carry that through.
All right, I have a couple of other questions. About the debt service schedules, are you having difficulty getting those?
No.
Because Lisa Dickinson should be able to do those in less than an hour.
Yeah, Lisa and Amy actually have been working on them. The reality is Amy was away on vacation, then Lisa was away on vacation, then I was away on vacation. Three of us have never been on the same phone
That's
call together.
important because we're going to need that, hopefully in our recommendation, because we have to include something about the impact on the rates. So we have to get those debt service schedules.
Amy's cognizant of that, and
Right.
she's completely aware of it, and they are working on that. There are some philosophical decisions the capital planning committee need to reach, and that's whether they want to borrow for the full 40 years that may be allowed.
But
or
that's
do-
not a capital planning committee decision, I don't think.
I think it is.
No, but see, the
Not
capital
my-
planning
not on that committee, I shouldn't
The
say.
capital planning committee deals with a percentage of the levy. This is not in the levy. This is strictly water and sewer, the rates of which are set by the Board of Selectmen and approved by the Board of Selectmen. So I was a little surprised to see this article was co-sponsored by the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, but then I figured it was only because of the debt service schedules that they wanted the Capital Planning and Improvement Committee to get. But this is a selectmen's, article. And the other point I wanted to
Kevin, let me
make.
just expand upon what you just said. I think until such time we formally put an enterprise in place, you are actually guaranteeing the full faith and interest of the community tax base on that bond. So I think it is,
Yeah, but
I
it
think
has
it is
nothing to
because.
do, it has nothing to do with the tax levy.
I think it-
Nothing. It all comes out of the water and sewer rates.
Yeah, I will stand corrected if I'm wrong. I believe until we formalize the enterprise, there is some very gray territory
No.
there.
Just like the 250,000 you spent, didn't come out of the levy. That came out of water and sewer money.
But we didn't borrow it either.
No, you don't have to borrow, you spent it.
I think the question becomes when you borrow it, and when you go to the bond market. I think that's when the question arises.
I did a lot of borrowing for
I know
water
that.
and sewer, and it never came out of the levy. Never. And the capital planning and improvement planning committee is supposed to take that 1.9% of the levy and decide how to distribute it among the many and varied requests that we get. But the water and sewer is not even, on the plate, because it's not in that levy that we're looking to grab 1.9% of. So, and if, to Frank's point about the town spending $6 million, that's $6 million plus interest. You have to
Sure.
remember that. So it's a lot more than $6 million. So if you do have any problems getting those debt service schedules, just let me know.
Sure.
All right.
I know they're working on them, and they shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I have Richard next.
Sure. I have a question, but a comment first. And actually, I think you covered it all, because my questions were going to be about kind of when will we have that information? And will Joe be coming back and us talking through this again once we know full financial impact? Because, I agree with Frank, while I, just one comment,
Sure.
while, I know, great, you've been working on this a long time. When you hear it for the first time, that it's no choice, you have to pay. It's always, that's what probably will get excitement at a town meeting, because, in my mind, you start thinking, well, why? And then you ask questions of, how did this get here? And we're going to go around in circles. But at the end of the day, it sounds like we're going to have no choice. But the questions I would want to ask revolve solely around financing and how we're going to pay for this. Because, we had a tough year last year, and what is this going to do to us?
Well, it's not going to do anything to us. It's going to
Okay.
do something to
Ratepayers.
the ratepayers for
All
water
right,
and
then,
sewer.
back to Frank's
So,
comment.
so the other thing is, I think I can guarantee, Joe, that we are not going to drag him back in here.
Okay.
We have to produce the warrant by about the 17th of September, and we have 18 other articles to look at. So if you have any questions, that Joe does not have an answer for now, we can
Well, I
make
think-
sure that that we ask them by email and get an answer.
I was going to say, funnel them through Ted, and Ted gets them to me. I
So
respond to him his
I
answer.
guess
Right.
saying you're going to bond something for 10 to 15 years or 40 years
It's a
is
big difference.
very different.
Sure.
And I don't know how you vote on something like that
Well,
until you know.
we're not going to vote
Okay.
on this one until we have some more information, but we're not going to, drag Joe back in here to give us
That sounds
that
good.
little bit of information. But, so we'll try and get all the details of the proposed financing in time. There are a couple of articles that we just got today, and we're not gonna even think about them until after our warrant has gone to print, because there's just too much on our plate. But anyway, we're not gonna get anybody back in twice. So, if you have a question, now Jean has a question, I believe. Is that right?
Actually, it was the same. I wanted to know if we could have the debt service schedules when you gave us the rest of the costs.
Sure.
And also, I was wondering, you talked about the history of this since 2007, going back and forth, all the drama with Canton. How was that paid for? Was it just your own budget?
It was only, that was all through Canton. It was all the work that was done was on Canton's part. The only thing that we've done is when they went to reconnect their system to their pipes and shut us off.
Yeah.
It was the work that we did was commissioning the hydraulic model and the water master plan, the high service area master plan.
And that's what you spoke about with that.
And we did that in-house within our own budget, within our own water budget, and the estimate I gave Mr. Sorgi was approximately $250,000.
Thank you.
So, this might not go down well with the ratepayers, but it's the history and it's the obvious essential solution. If you vote against it, then you're telling your neighbors that they'll have their water shut off. So,
I don't mean to be melodramatic, use hyperbole, but, I've been talking about this in every forum I have an opportunity to. This is not a surprise to anybody who reads the paper or watches cable TV or sees other meetings, that whether they're capital meetings or whether they're selectmen's meetings. This has been a hot button issue for several years, and I think we even alluded to it at the floor of town meeting about things on the horizon. And this is the big horizon.
well, fortunately, you got to broadcast your message tonight, perhaps further than this room. So, any other questions for Joe? Nope. All right. Well, Joe, thanks so much for coming in.
Speak on Article 2 and Article 3?
No, he's not.
Those enterprise?
These are accounting
Those are accounting,
concepts,
okay.
pretty much, I think.
Though I firmly believe and support the articles, they truly are just an accounting question and how it's done, and there's a lot of benefits that affect the system because of it. That's something that for another night.
Well, I think the greatest benefit will be that we won't be debating the virtues of a big E versus a little e anymore. So
That's a benefit.
looking forward to that. So,
Ted, if there is some remote chance you do need me to clarify it, this is very, very important. If you need me back in a meeting, just give me some notice and I'll try to get here for that, okay? But otherwise, I'll try to feed the information as it comes through you. I'd rather not talk to individual members, if that's okay. If it funnels through you, you can get your answers and my answers back to everybody,
absolutely.
okay?
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks a lot.
Good night.
Right.
Okay, so, sorry we're running late. Jack and Steve, if you want to join us, that'd be terrific. And is that Brian? Somebody else back there? You got everybody. You got everybody. Geez, I don't know if we have enough room, but, come on down.
Actually, a quick question on the last one.
Sure.
Would a no vote, I know it was a little sarcasm, but would a no vote also
Fabulous.
be used if you're not in agreement on how they're financing it?
You mean at the town meeting? Oh, right now?
With us, when we discuss it?
I think that you basically want to vote for the desired outcome. And if you don't like the method by which that outcome is getting arrived, you still have to vote for the outcome, even if you don't like how we got there. So, does that help?
Yeah, that does.
Okay.
We're not go for the least painless. I thought that's what
All right,
That's what
so,
Yeah. Least painful.
we're moving on to well, we don't know what the ultimate numbers will be at the moment. I think it's Article 14. that right?
Yep.
Oh, great. Oftentimes, the Board of Selectmen will mix up the numbers later on for publication purposes. Anyway, Article 14, fire space needs,
Is that
fire
too small?
station facilities renovation.
Is that too small? Can you see that? Anyone down here, can you read that?
I can see it.
You can see it, okay, thank you, Lee Michael.
At any rate, just to fill in the audience or anybody who doesn't know, last town meeting, we had this report of the Milton Fire Space Needs Committee, was delivered and presented. And this is, now we have the whole committee back.
Yes, it is.
All five, okay. We have the whole committee back, and we're grateful for your presence. One of the things that I think this means is that we don't have to worry about assigning another committee.
The moderator, we tried to wiggle out of this, but the moderator said we were not discharged, so. Like all good deeds, it's not going left unfinished.
Okay, anyway, so, do you want to just take it away? First of all, this fire station facilities renovation does not talk about any money. This article as delivered to us, so.
God love them. If I can just take a time to introduce the committee again.
I would love it if you would, because I'm gonna get it wrong, but.
No, you won't.
I got Tom, I got Brian.
So Brian Toohey, one of our committee members, formerly of the Boston Fire Department, who I worked with when I was with the Boston Fire Department in another capacity. You know Chief Grant. Tom Hess is a member of our committee who also served on the school building committee as an architect. And Tom Kelly is a precinct, town meeting member from precinct 7, right? 8. It changes every now and then. And we were appointed by the town moderator to come up with this plan that we presented at town meeting, to look at different configurations, where it would be going, where we could possibly put fire stations in town. Could we look at, as we said at town meeting, reducing the number of fire stations from 3 to 2? And a lot of that was driven by response times and by town-owned property that we could build on. That's kind of like where it is. We thought we had a scheme that met our response times, that could have reduced the fire stations from 3 to 2, but the one piece of property we were looking at was conservation land, and that kind of got taken off the table for us. And that's where we went back to looking at our original run times that we had for EMS runs, medical runs, as well as fire suppression runs. And we came up with the conclusion that we don't know how this worked out, but the locations of the 3 fire stations in town meet the needs of this town from a fire suppression standpoint, and also a medical response time. So we went back to looking at what could we do with that, and that's the recommendations that we made here. We felt, we said at town meeting, that we've taken this probably as much as we can as citizens, with some very knowledgeable folks in fire stations and fire operations. But at this point, we need to take it to the next level of this game, which is we'd like to hire, put out an RFP to bring a consultant in who knows things about building fire stations in Massachusetts, and get to the next point, coming up with the design features, just to rough this out to what it might look like, what the cost might be for 3 new fire stations, what the timetable might be to present this to the town, what the order of, we have our ideas of what the order should be. We talked about renovation versus new construction. We'd like to have someone who's more knowledgeable in this field take another look at that, not just rely on us, but have a professional team come in and actually take a look at, are there some ways we can work with renovation versus new construction, see if we can save some money on that. But that's kind of where this is. We made a presentation to selectmen about a month ago. Two of the recommendations that we had from the selectmen, one was to reach out with Rick Neely's committee on the Town Government Study Committee, which we said we would do, and also to open up this presentation to a larger audience at town. We presented it to town meeting, we presented it to the selectmen, and to get some citizen input into what we presented, to see what citizens feel about their fire stations and how we can move forward with this. So that's kind of where we are right now at this point in time. We did put a RFI out on the street. We asked, there was no reason not for us to do that, just to see what the cost of this might be. And we looked at, we sent this out to, I believe, to 8, maybe 9 companies. 6 of them responded, and we had price ranging anywhere from $34,000 to $100,000 to do this next stage of what you see in front of you with those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bullets, to see how we can come to this, something more concrete on what cost might be for this, and get back to you folks. I would think the prudent number that we've all come up with, we've discussed this a bit, would probably be up to $75,000 to bring this to the next level. And we'd also like the ability, what we're asking here in this article is to go out and seek grants, gifts, and donations from other folks across the town that might lower the town's cost on that. So
That's good news, because I'm not sure where, at fall town meeting, I come up with any money except out of our reserve fund, and I'd be a little reluctant right now at the beginning of the year to say, sure, take 75. So that part of the article is crucial, and you know, if there is any way you could self-fund this study through a grant or charitable uncle or something, that'd be great. We would be, wholeheartedly behind that effort. I just don't know. I don't believe that an appropriation can be made at the fall town meeting. So
we didn't want to lose any time and any momentum that we had coming off the work we had done in the previous year, because we did take a long, hard look at the fire stations, and we think in some cases they're very critical to replace them, or at least do those emergency repairs we talked about.
No, I understand that the time lag between the effort at gathering the information and then the implementation of repairs or new construction is infuriating. Once you give us the report in May, we had already, for instance, allocated resources to Consolidated Facilities for certain repairs that were not covering any of the fire stations, and so there's another delay. I don't know. It's deferred maintenance is a heck of a problem, I don't know. I sort of grew up with the idea that the firemen, when they weren't putting out a fire, were painting the picket fence in front of the fire station. So some of this deferred maintenance is a bit surprising, when you look at the report. But there's fixing roofs. I mean, there are some desperate things to be done here, and I don't know how best that happens. Some of these things ought to happen, in my opinion, through an effort with Consolidated Facilities and getting that into a specific request for next spring, because there goes another year.
Right.
And some of this is getting more and more critical. So I don't know. I think as far as moving the larger project to the next level, at this juncture, that would be terrific, but we can't fund it right now. We'd have to, I believe we'd have to look at this again in the spring. in order to actually appropriate money to it. But even more important in my mind is some of the short-term needs of the three stations that ought to be addressed pretty quickly with a laundry list developed through consolidated facilities.
If I may, I think a couple of the recommendations we made at town meeting, and just to reiterate them, because I think they are kind of where we were going with this, and that is that there are some decisions that need to be made by the town, whatever the town is. God love the town. One is, and the chief can speak about this much better than I can, but the issue of fire service-based EMS. Currently, we have a third party that provides EMS service for it, for the town, with Fallon Ambulance. We need to get to a decision on whether this town will have a traditional fire suppression-only fire department, and then go to the medical college as they do now, or will it be fire-based EMS within the Milton Fire Department? Now, I could say I have a dog in this fight, but the basic issue for us for this project is, what are you going to do? What are we going to do as a town? Because if we decide to go down with the recommendation of the chief, which is to look at fire-based EMS, that has an implication for fire stations and equipment and manning and how many bunks and bunk rooms and training facilities you need. If we decide not to do that, that makes the boxes a little smaller, which allows us to make the right decision as far as building the fire station, but doesn't hit the ultimate issue of what does the fire department look like, 10, 15 years from now. So that's a decision that I think somehow the town has to make that may or may not cost us any money. That's one of the recommendations we made. The other, though, is working, as you said, Ted, is working with consolidated facilities to come up with that list with Bill Ritchie about what are the things that are safety issues in these fire stations that need to be done right away, whatever right away is. And I know it's all driven by bucks, but we don't want to put firefighters at risk while they're waiting to respond to emergency calls in their own fire housing. That's just not right. So those are the things the two things have to be done kind of like right away while we're still working this thing out.
Kevin?
Steve, if we had a fire-based EMS, would we bill the patients?
Yes,
We would, so there would be a revenue stream there.
there would be a revenue stream, yes.
Do you have any estimates, Jack, on how much?
At this point, I don't, and one of the things, and this is going on probably 3 years at this point, one of the reasons that it hasn't gone further than it has, as far as a study out of Milton, is that there's a battle going on at the State House right now with Blue Cross Blue Shield basically driving it. That, what are the rates that are allowed to be charged? They're trying to constrain the rates at a certain level that can't be met by, the argument anyways, can't be met by public fire or private EMS. And until that resolves, we really can't study that. We'd be foolish to study that and make that jump, because so at this point in time, they're not doing this to the public side, but to the private side, there's certain insurers that are actually paying the customer rather than the provider. So, the chase is on to get that money back. So for that reason, we haven't done that hard study to see, what the income would be.
Just so I'll have it clear in my mind, when we have a medical emergency at a residence in town, the fire department responds because Fallon's might not always be available?
Fallon's is always going to be available. It's where are they coming from, who can be there first. And that wouldn't change if we went to a fire-based EMS system. When we say that the response from the town is well-suited for it, it would be stationing ambulance right here at this station here. It meets all the run times to the whole town. But the run times to the whole town are get there in 8 minutes or less. The run times for fire engines are 4 minutes or less. So, there's a good shot that the engine's gonna beat the ambulance in regardless of who's running it and where it's coming from. So that's really, take a cardiac arrest, it's that first 5 minutes that are critical. You want those guys, and an engine company, this is a question that comes up in other shapes and fashions all the time. Why do we send the big red truck? Well, forget the big red truck, just erase that from your mind. Picture, 3 guys walking in, 2 to initiate CPR, 1 to get the automatic defibrillator going. It's tailor-made for that function. So that would remain in effect regardless.
And the town does have a history of running the ambulance service because
Yes.
the police department used to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, it was a different format at the time. I do not believe, I could be wrong on that, but I know the billing at least wouldn't have been in the shape and fashion that it's in right now. But it's, years ago, I did look into it to a certain extent as union president. And, they say the payer profile of the town would be very, very suitable to do it. It's just a matter of where this, and hopefully with a new administration coming in, hopefully this thing's gonna resolve and we can move forward and look at this.
Thanks, Jack.
Wow. So this is, in my mind, this is a tough article because it's hard to know. We're talking about fire-based EMS services. That's really not mentioned in the article, okay?
No, it's not.
Okay, all right. But it is definitely a prerequisite to asking one of your respondents to the RFI, what kind of work are they being charged with? Designing for including that or designing for, the way we have it now. So that's kind of the whole fire-based EMS it's a large question. I guess the other question is how do you pay 34 or 75 or 100,000, any of those numbers? How do you pay for that before Springtown meeting?
Without money, I'd be insane to do that.
Right.
And people may think I'm crazy sometimes, but that's what we're asking for. That's what this article asks for.
Right. I'm just not sure that we can appropriate. Go ahead, Steve.
In Springtown meeting, we projected all of the revenues the town would have for this fiscal year and appropriated those across budgets, so that whatever this amount of money is not in any of those budgets. So it's going to be carved out of something else, and therein lies the problem. I was on this committee in 1999, and Chief Larson showed us around the stations, and they were deplorable back then. So I can only imagine how much worse they've got. So, I certainly would support the study and take it to the next step. But right where we are now, we don't have money to appropriate to this, except if we tap into the reserve fund, and that's not really an unforeseen kind of a cost expenditure.
And I can appreciate that, and I think we all can. But what I would suggest to you is, if we can't get this money funded in fall town meeting, then we better start preparing to do this at Springtown meeting. Because this is not going away.
I understand the urgency. I'm just, I saw this come up and,
right.
Geez, this would have been nice along with this, but, that it's the time delay that I was expressing my frustration with.
Absolutely.
Which is what we're up against here. Frank?
My problem is that I just got this off my printer today and scanned a little bit. I read it all, but it was more of a scan than a study, so I apologize for that. But as you've been discussing EMT and so forth, I don't think that you're ready for that. I don't think you can ask anybody to make a study for you until you get the basics down, saying what sort of fire department are you going to have? What sort of, the question is, do you need more equipment? Is the equipment you have adequate? Are you thinking of bigger equipment, pieces of equipment? Are we talking about big ladder trucks or something? And then there was in here somewhere where there was a concern about have we enough people to do the kinds of things you say you want to do. You say, when we send someone else to another town, we don't have enough people here, and so forth. It just seems to me that this report isn't ready for somebody to make a study. I don't think it's ready. That's my personal opinion.
I hear what you're saying, Frank. I can tell you that the feedback we got from the companies that we sent this to, architectural firms, people that build fire stations, were, I'll take some credit for it with these gentlemen here. They said we did a great job. This is one of the best studies they've seen come out of a town meeting or a town committee that they've ever seen, to the stage we could take it to.
And it didn't cost us anything, Frank.
And we came in under budget. So, yeah, but,
But this article presents us with a real difficulty as to how to move forward on it. Lee Michael.
Is it, do we have the ability to suggest an amendment to the article that would allow this committee to go and seek outside funding and also defer until spring town meeting the consideration to appropriate funds if they're not able to get outside funding?
Okay, so there's a couple of questions here. First of all, whatever article comes in is not what gets voted on. What gets voted on is the recommendation we write. Okay, so we can take this article and carve it up any way we want and make that our recommendation. As far as the question of deferring, the question of appropriation to next spring, I'm going to have to ask about that, because I think there are some rules about not bringing back the same article if it's been voted down within the same year. So, I mean, if this were to be, if we wrote a new recommendation, and the town passed it, and basically just said, yeah, we'll look at an appropriation to fund this work in the spring, then they still don't get the money. They can't do anything about it right away. So,
but the article, the way I see it, would give us the authorization as a committee to, without limitation of the Board of Selectmen and the Fire Department, to apply for state and federal funds to assist and/or to reimburse the town in connection with any of the foregoing, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept grants, gifts, and donations on behalf of the town for the purpose of the article. So I don't know if that's wiggle room.
That part's great. If you can.
I love when you tell me things are great. But without that permission to do that, do we have the ability to continue our work?
No, it's probably, I don't know. I don't know. I like this article for including that so that there's a possibility you can get funded, all right? It just can't be from the town, per se, unless you, we don't have any discretionary accounts. Steve?
And I have to think it would be problematic to go out with an RFR for services when you don't have the money to.
It would be most problematic.
So, it just strikes me that the best way to go forward here would be to come at this in Springtown meeting when all the money's being appropriated.
Right, I mean, our recommendation could be to refer this article back to the Fire Space Needs Committee for further elaboration, study, whatever, and then it can come back in the spring, and then we can attach a number to it and vote an appropriation. So, I don't know whose hand went up first. Okay.
can you guys discover whether you can have the authority to proceed, even though there's not going to be any allocation of funds? And is there, what's the method whereby you can find out whether you guys can continue and seek grants and seek alternate sources of revenue?
I don't know, but we could definitely ask town council on that.
If we pass this article
Right.
as written, that would grant them the ability to seek outside funding.
So then we could just simply recommend that it proceeds as written without any recommendation for an allocation of funds currently
That's true.
by the town.
But if they then need money in the spring, there's the concern Ted
There-
raised that it might not be able to come back within a year? Is that what you said?
Well,
Unless we,
the next article would then have a dollar figure on it, so the argument would be that it's different because it's distinguished by an appropriation. It would have to be resubmitted, by January 4th, something like
So
that.
if I heard you correctly, did you say if an article is defeated, it can't come back?
Oh,
But if an article is passed, it could come back in another
In
form.
a different form.
Sure. Well, and it would be, and I think in either case, you're not looking for an appropriation with this article, at least as written at the moment, even though you have some numbers that might be satisfactory for the purposes you're hoping for, to study. But, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we could all get behind this article as written. It's just we couldn't get behind an appropriation because we can't make one.
I would think that in the time between, if, I'm hearing exactly what you're saying, what this committee's saying to us. But I still think that we could probably move forward and trying to get the information that you need to for the town to make an intelligent decision about fire-based EMS that would give you the information you're looking at if things at the State House started to move after the next, 90 days? Is there going to be a new governor? Whether you
Well-
like it or not? I mean, things are going to change at the State House in the next 90 days, at least by January, which is, I mean, those things we could start moving ahead with and giving information to town to make that happen. At least to get to the point to make a decision on the future of the Milton Fire Department.
So, one of the issues here, I think, is the Fire Space Needs Committee was formed for this original purpose here. The moderator has not excused you.
No, he has not.
So, who's in charge of directing your efforts?
I believe the town moderator is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And our charge very clearly was to get this report to town meeting by the spring town meeting of 2014, which we did.
Right. No, and well done. But is there a further charge to study the question of fire-based EMS service?
There is not one at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. And it would be up to the town moderator to charge you with.
And
that
I would
question.
imagine at some point at town meeting to authorize that as well. I would think.
So perhaps that's something that ought to be added into this recommendation. Okay. Kevin?
Basically, that's what I was going to say, what Paul did, but I'm wondering now if we did that and we permitted the committee and authorized them to raise money through grants or gifts or donations, there's no authorization for expenditure, though. What would they do with the money?
Why can't we authorize the expenditure if they get it?
Okay, we'd have to do that, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
My assumption was that they would probably not raise the total amount of money between now and the spring town meeting, and that it would come back at Springtown meeting with hopefully a reduced number because it will be offset by some. I mean, if they raise $75,000 between now and the Springtown meeting, that would be fantastic. But I would think that they would still be searching for some amount of money.
Or even if they raise zero, it might
They
be-
raised $34,000.
Yeah, do you have a donor?
Picked
in
our,
mind?
no, I'm just saying, that was the number. There's a one bid they got.
Yeah, no, I think, all right, I think, I did say earlier to Richard that I didn't think I was going to get anybody back here. But there are a number of questions here that I think I need to refer to town council, and just to make sure I'm on solid ground with whatever direction we end up going in on this. I would like to further the work of the Fire Space Needs Committee, whether it's under that name or something else. There's a lot of important work to be done. How best to go about it, I'm not sure. This certainly, I'm glad you put this in. It opens the door for more discussion. I don't know, at the fall town meeting, it's not a question of changing a zoning bylaw or anything like that. This is looking essentially for money which we can't do until the spring. So let me get back to you, Steve, after I ask some questions to see what we can legally consider. Okay?
Sounds great.
And you don't all five have to come back, but I certainly appreciate your coming out tonight. I don't know, does anybody else have any questions about this article? Clearly, I should have thought of some of these questions up front, but there it is. We'll come back to this perhaps next Wednesday.
I just have, if there's any questions you have on the report, we'd be more than happy to, I mean, you've got the group that wrote it.
Right. No, I mean, the report, I mean, I will say it just blows my mind that pictures can be taken like this. I mean, that there wasn't somebody who was handy enough to put in a patch or a paint or something, you know. I know everybody's busy, but some of this stuff just looks like bad housekeeping. But stuff like the roof has to be addressed. And
If I could just comment on that, a lot of what you saw in the pictures is the result of the roof leak, so it's sort of putting good money after bad to patch and paint, and then in the next storm, have it leak in the same place again.
well, I got you there, and perhaps a lot of that is what created damage to the electronics, but, I mean, it mentions over and over again that there's no carbon monoxide alarms. I'm sorry, I have them in my house. They don't cost that much, you know? I think some of these little things over the years probably could have come out of, you know, the small expenses could have come out of your budget.
The problem,
you know?
just throwing CO out there and smoke detectors, it's not a residential system. So,
Sure.
although
It's gotta be
CO costs
hardwired,
20
it's gonna be $3,000 a station. I got that.
Right.
But, you know, that's the kind of thing maybe ought to be in your budget, the one that you're about to present. Anyway, so there's much work to be done, and one of the things we have to do is figure out what's possible to move any of these issues forward, all right? So I'll work on that in the interim, and we'll probably come back to this article on Wednesday. Lee Michael.
You're not walking out with a vote tonight, but obviously there's going to be some work done. I just wanted to say that since you aren't walking out with something, that I do appreciate the report that you gave at Springtown meeting, and I personally am very supportive of your committee, and I hope you are able to continue doing your work because it's important. So thanks.
We appreciate that, because at the end of the day, it's our fire department. It's everybody's. You don't want to see them come to your house, but if you need them, you definitely want them ready to go to work.
I don't want to wait for the Randolph or the Canton Fire Department.
You don't.
Not the Canton.
No, you don't.
Especially not the Canton, yeah.
Or the Boston Fire Department, for that matter.
Canton Fire would harbor no ill will.
Just put no water.
Nobody from Canton's going to be watching this broadcast.
They are
I'm sure.
fine.
Anyway, thank you, gentlemen, for coming in, and we'll see how we can move this forward.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. And thank you for what you guys do. We appreciate it.
All right. Okay. How's everybody doing? Great. I would like to push right through
You don't
here.
want that corner anymore.
We have a couple of, meeting minutes are at the end. Okay. So we have a handout here on a draft estimated, whatever, budget for fiscal year 2016. What this information gives you is revenues and, let's see, geez, maybe, do I get a copy? Oh, shucks, here they are, sorry.
Set that one around.
Okay, let's start this one around the other way. And I will get around to cleaning up the workbook and posting it at some point, but you guys. But this just gives you something to play with at the moment. So you have one horizontal and one vertical, okay?
That one coming around?
Everybody gets one horizontal, one.
We need the vertical.
Horizontal, thanks. So,
We need another one.
no, don't bother.
Maybe one more
It's a
down
lot.
that way.
We're good, thanks.
Okay.
Okay. So, let's see. So, to start with, the revenue sheet, which is your horizontal sheet, okay? This tells you what the final estimated revenue for fiscal year 2014 was in the first column. And we will have actual numbers pretty soon, but I do not have them yet. Okay, so for instance, these are all what our estimated revenues were for, for all categories, and especially local receipts. Obviously, motor vehicle excise cost for the year, motor vehicle excise revenues for the year just finished didn't come out to $2,875,000 exactly. This is our estimated revenue still, okay? But these are the numbers that we used in order to estimate the revenue for last year, for this coming year, fiscal year 15. The one that we're in now, we estimated those last spring on the basis, in many cases, of the 14 estimates. So I think the 14 estimates are useful to have at this moment. And so now we're trying to look ahead at the year we're responsible for, which is fiscal year 16. And so there are some things that are pretty easy to look at. You can only raise the property taxes by 2.5%. You know what it is. You just add 2.5. Pretty straightforward. For the most part, this is not reflective of any analysis of, gee, I think my motor vehicle excise is going to go up a little bit more. We'll get to that later. For the moment, most of these values, unless I know that there's a difference, have been held fairly. Things going here. So for instance, the second page, there is no difference between what we estimated for 15.
That's the column that you and Jim have.
Oh, sorry.
Help me out.
Okay, so Frank, the first column is what the warrant committee and what town meeting appropriated or voted on for fiscal year 14.
Okay.
The second column is what we did last spring for fiscal year 15. And the third column is what we're thinking about is going to happen this year.
Thank you.
Okay? And what the difference, in the last column, is what the difference is between what we think might happen in 16
And what happened?
and what we think might happen in 15, okay, because we're still in, we've just started fiscal year 15. So on the second page, if you look at the difference column, you'll see that I haven't registered any differences, okay? Last page is where the fun is. Overlay reserve, we got 341,000 last year, okay? This would be in the middle column, Frank.
I got it.
Okay. Some of these numbers are what we actually got in order to use for fiscal year 15. And so the overlay reserve we received was 341,000. The estimate of 164,000 came from our discussions last year when we decided that, gee, the average of the last 9 years or so has shown us a return of about $164,000 a year. We can probably rely on that. We're hoping to. And rather than treat that $164,000 as something that was untouchable for operational expense, we pretty much figure, hey, 164,000 is what we ought to be able to expect, and we'd like to have that available for operations. However, that is 177,000 less than last year. The next line, free cash, you can see in 2014 we had $2,238,000. For 15 we had $2,005,000. So why am I estimating $1 million? Well, free cash is a pretty volatile thing. We are going to get a reading on that, I think, end of October. You know, it'll be whatever free cash we generated this year will be certified by the Department of Revenue, and we'll know what we have. We know it's going to drop because of the sources of this last one. Some of them have been, you know, one of the reasons we had that much free cash was because of the overestimating the budget for group insurance by, I don't know, $400,000. So we know that there are a lot of things that are going to reduce our free cash number. It might end up being $1,200,000, might end up being $800,000. I don't know. For this is an exercise. This is not. I'm not staking my life on this. This is an exercise. I'm putting in $1 million. I think that's probably what we'll get. I can almost guarantee we'll get about $400,000 because we looked long and hard last year at our projections of local revenue and which Amy Dexter, the town accountant, develops, and she puts a lot of thought into a consistently conservative projection on these, and the result is that it often generates some free cash, and we are confident in, I think we're confidently predicting that local revenue will probably generate about $400,000 in free cash. So, of course, I'm hoping for a little more, but I'm guessing that we're going to get more than that. So, bottom line, what does our revenue look like compared to last year? Only about $720,000 more, okay? And the main reason for that is you can only generate by real estate taxes about $1,900,000, and if things like free cash drop, well, then you're starting off behind the 8 ball, okay? So, moving on, we'll take a look at estimated expenditures, all right? So again, we have fiscal year 2014 appropriations, okay? This is what we appropriated. This is not what the actual expense was as of last June, because I don't have those numbers yet. And for comparative purposes, I think this works better right now for this exercise. So the first column is what we appropriated for each department or expense for fiscal year 2014. And the second column then is what we did last spring for fiscal year 2015. And so then I'm looking at what are going to be my fiscal year 2016 requests. So this is a whole other discussion. Departments generally, maybe aside from school department, request along the lines of what we ask them for. So for instance, if we tell all the departments in town, hi, we want to see a level dollar budget, and that's the only option we give them, then we know the number coming back to us as a request is going to be the same as last year. That's the definition of the level dollar budget. I think maybe we'll have a discussion about level dollars versus level service versus contractual obligations and things like that, because we, or the board of town manager and this committee develop in conjunction the budget approach for the year. So we have to put together a letter to the departments saying, this is what we want back from you. All right? And we want to make clear to the departments, that, what our definition is of level service. Last year we sent out a request for level service and everybody had a grand time with it. Some departments added new programs, which didn't seem to quite fit the definition of level service. Some departments, didn't add a thing, which was great to see. They thought they felt that they were providing great service without the need for any other funds. Some departments are up against changing circumstances in their mission to the community and need more resources, and maybe some departments need fewer resources. But at any rate, the departments will give back to us what we ask them, so we have to make sure that we are careful about what we're asking for. Up until last year, the warrant committee, or the warrant committee in conjunction with the town manager, asked the departments for level dollar budget only. And after about 4 or 5 years of that, when we asked them last year for both level dollar and level service, well, there was a lot of pent-up demand and we got all kinds of requests. And we ended up dealing with them. This is why you want to read those first 3 pages, okay, of last year's warrant. So I presume everybody who's watching this will have read their warrants. So, at any rate, so right now, when I'm looking at this estimated fiscal year 2016 requests column, the assumption I've put in here, with a couple of exceptions, is level dollar budget assumptions, but handling contractual pay raises, okay? And that's about it, okay? So the exception, so for instance, I'm just going to take an example, halfway down the first page. Under audit, okay, which is the first line of the second big block of expenses, you'll see that I estimated the request to go up $8,000. All right, and that's because there's a GASB audit that comes along every other year that costs us $8,000. So that's why that number is not level. Then you look at the Board of Assessors, or for that matter, the Selectmen's number, which has a negative $50,000 next to it. When we asked, one of the things that we did appropriate last year was a $50,000 IT study, which was buried in the Selectmen's budget. Could have been could have been perhaps a separate article, okay? But they chose not to advance it as a separate article. They put it into their budget as a above-level dollar, but a level service request. At any rate, there it was. We did finally appropriate the money for it, but I need to take it out in terms of what I'm estimating their request should be for next year, or fiscal year 2016, because we're not going to fund it twice, okay? So that's why it has come out. Okay, so there will be a lot of questions here, and Frank, you're up first.
I can't take my education hat off. Can we put that up on the board? You're talking, I mean, this is a great education for me. I'm a brand new person, and the people watching this would be a tremendous education program. It's my educational hat.
Well, I
Can we put this
appreciate.
up on the
Document up on the board.
Is it possible to get that up there? I'll refrain. I'll just.
No, that's fine. It's
If
fine.
you can do it.
I enjoy looking forward as opposed to trying to click around the screen.
No,
to
I don't want you to
point things
click on the
out, but-
screen. It's just that, it's just a tremendous, I mean, this is just wonderful to listen to. Really,
Okay.
it's an education for me anyhow.
Great. If you can put it up there, then go for it.
Thank you.
Okay, so one of my concerns about cable coverage is that if somebody tunes in right now and has not bothered listening to the conjectural framework for these numbers, I'm going to get a rash of emails, okay?
I apologize.
And now it's up on the screen. They'll be looking at that and going, "What are you, out of your mind, Mr. Chairman?" Anyway, so that's one of the reasons, to be honest, I didn't put it up there. But we'll see what happens, okay? So, at any rate, so when I was generating the estimated fiscal year 2016 request column, most of these are level dollar with last year's budgets, having stripped out extraneous things like the IT study that was buried in the selectmen's budget, which won't be repeated. Okay, however, if you go down to the next block and look at group health insurance, you'll see that, well, here's a challenge. This is going up $511,000. Okay, this is the estimate from last year's budget of what it would be the following year. So that's where that came from. The next line down is retirement. That's $297,000 more than it was last year, and so that's a chunk of change too. And those were calculated just last year, and they do it about every 3 years, so that's a pretty solid number. So debt service is a little bit down, which is fortunate. That's because we paid a great deal of it last year when we weren't expecting to. Turn the page. There are not a lot of changes. Well, the changes are in the right. You can see the reserve fund, we have an extra, is down. We haven't, actually, you know what? That number I'll have to change because we had been running 250,000 as an annual number for the reserve fund, and we decided that we could, by funding some of the repeat customers for reserve funds, by funding their budgets properly, we could lower our reserve fund to $200,000. And I can see right now I made a mistake on that number. It should be 200, not 250, for a difference of 250. That difference is, the reason it was 450,000 last year is because we're holding 250,000 for the projected demolition costs of the Hendry's building. Anyway, now the other reason these numbers are purely conjectural at the moment is that the last couple of years we've been wrestling with the problem in terms of accurately appropriating money. We've been wrestling with the problem that a lot of the labor contracts were unnegotiated or unconcluded out there, and some of them have been that way for a couple of years. So I think, although I need an update, and maybe Tricia can tell me, are there any outstanding contracts? Okay. Town manager and the school committee made a great deal of progress over the last year. There may be one or two, I'm not really sure. But at any rate, if you keep looking down at these next few lines, you will see town wage set-asides, union and non-union, fiscal year 14. Town wage set-asides, union and non-union, fiscal year 14 and 15. And then the last line is fiscal year 14, 15, and 16. Now, that's the amount of money we need to budget if sort of an average wage increase goes through, and until until that happens and we get the actual budgets from all the departments for what was actually spent for the year that just finished, hopefully reflective of a concluded labor agreement, then those conclusions will wash through to fiscal year 15, so we'll have a better base on which to build 16 upon. But for the moment, the reason that all these budgets can be level dollar and still accommodate contractual pay raises is that I have these three lines showing what these cumulative pay raises would comprise. Now, the one for 16 is a shot in the dark, okay? Nobody's going to hold me to this one. But it could be about right, all right? So that's where those numbers are coming from. Let's see. The rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. The stabilization fund contributions last year were not up to the previous formulas, up to the previous level that had been dictated by formulas that we had been using for quite a while. One of the reasons for not contributing that much is that we didn't have the money, okay? But we felt the need to plug away somewhat anyway. I would like to get back, if possible, to a better contribution, level of contribution. Just a brief aside on stabilization funds, you sort of look at that and go, oh my God, that's $350,000 or $450,000. And that's not even putting any money into the capital stabilization fund, which is intentional because we need it for debt service, and rather than putting money into it and then taking it out, I'm just leaving it zero at the moment. Anyway, stabilization funds are really, I don't know what people think they might be for, but you really don't want to dip into them unless, there's an earthquake right down Randolph Avenue, and we have a major disasters. Probably we could stop funding these funds when we had I don't know, $10 or $12 million in them, something like 10 or 12% of our annual budget. Maybe we could get away with slowing down on those, but we're a long ways away from that, and so I think we need to keep those contributions up. So that's about the bottom of that page. So the two things I skipped were the ones up way up top on the first page, the school department and the Blue Hills Regional School. The Blue Hills Regional School, I'm showing a $44,000 increase. It's 5%, okay? They were 4.9% last year. We don't have any control really over that budget. The school department, I'm guessing that they're going to request 2,200,000 greater than last year.
How much?
2,200,000.
Oh, okay.
It's that number in the far right-hand corner there, the difference number. That's about, I think they requested about 2,100,000 last year. We didn't give it all, but that's what was requested. We couldn't, didn't have it. But I think this is where the requests are going to come in. And when you look down at the bottom of page 2, for the difference between revenue and expenditure, you'll see that we're looking at a 2 million deficit.
Right.
All right, now, 2,117,000. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. I wrote this last spring. It's published in the warrant. I was predicting 2.2. So, this is where we are, and I will be happy to answer any questions I can. I don't have a crystal ball, Jonathan, but ask me.
Well,
go for it.
I'm just curious. All of last year, we talked about timing of the expected next override. I was wondering.
Mhm.
I'm hearing things around town. I was wondering what you've heard, whether we can expect the selectmen to take their responsibilities with respect to revenues seriously this year.
Oh, I think we always can. The selectmen often want to get all the information before making a move. And that's one way to approach it, okay? We don't have, as was pointed out to me last fall, we don't have the budget requests in yet. They are not due until about December. We don't have a number for free cash, and all those things. But this is a fairly conservative, I think, stab at what might happen. And don't worry, I will be forwarding it to the Board of Selectmen. And the Board of one of the encouraging things last year is that the town manager and town accountant and the head of the school's business department, and I'm not sure if I have everybody there, and one of the selectmen have been working on, long-range projections of financial requirements. And I'm hoping to have them come in and present to us and maybe whoever else wants to be here. But I have not arranged for that yet. But I think those numbers from the ad hoc 5-year planning committee and my numbers, I can't imagine that they're that far apart in terms of what we're looking at. And we'll, we'll see. One of the things I like about one of the articles we have in for the fall is the one that Anne Marie helped put together on my suggestion that we try and set up a new special fund for the deposit of any extra monies that we might come by. Now, in a situation like this, we're not about to come by any extra monies without an override. In the case of an override, there's an opportunity to take extra monies and squirrel them away. So that article may well be a jumping off point for a discussion of potential override.
Is that different from the stabilization fund?
Yes, on purpose. On purpose.
On purpose, okay.
Because your bond rating agencies don't like it if you put money into the stabilization fund and then take it out. And that's a problem because basically municipalities don't have a savings bank, and this could function as one, and that's my hope. Anyway, I'm sorry, Steve?
It's okay. Ted, relative to that 5-year plan, Is that a document or a financial model that's already built, or are they still working on that?
I believe it's a model. I'm sure it's getting tweaked continuously.
Yeah.
I don't know where it stands right now. I do know that before the season heated up, as it were, that at some point it was going to be presented to the selectmen, and like maybe this month.
So I think if we could get it ahead of them coming in to present it to us, it'll give us an opportunity to poke around with it a little and ask better questions.
Sure, I can try.
I have a question.
Richard.
I have a question, and please excuse my ignorance on this. And I'll first say, I mean, this is my 3rd year, so I thank you for this. I can tell you put a lot of time and effort into this, because this isn't, I don't think for new people, I mean, I don't believe we started this soon with some estimates put together, so this is awesome.
Well, last year we did have a similar document that we handed out at the end of September to the school committee and the Board of Selectmen when they joined us for a discussion that part of which went into executive session.
Yep.
Okay. And anyway, so that was when I was reminded that all the numbers weren't there yet. So.
But so this is what I'll start by saying this is great. My question, and so grant me some lenience on the answer. Be kind.
Please.
It seems to me that I get the majority of the differences is where you were driving them from, and a lot of it had to do, well, we gave it to you, we're taking it back because it was a one-year thing, or so I get the majority. The only one is a little, and I agree with you on the number, but the only one that's a little confusing at this stage would be the school department, because that's the only one that isn't derived from something specific that was given and then taken back, or something with a hard, this is the reason why. I think you derived it from just, they asked for it last year.
Sure.
Do you think it's, I mean, at this stage.
You want my thinking behind the
Yes.
2,200 number,
Yes.
the 2,200,000 number that I put up there? Okay. In order for the school department to meet their contractual needs, in other words, how much is their salary, their payroll going up, okay? There is a number there, okay? Glenn will get it to me eventually. Last year was 1,333,300 and something, okay? So that was part of, that sort of informs the base of what, okay, they're probably gonna need another 1,400,000 just to keep employing the same people, okay? So there's 1,400,000. Now, the last 2 years, they've had their advancement budget requests, okay? So that has been about 500,000 each year.
Right.
Okay? So now we're up about 1.9. And then there's usually a variety of non-contractual, non-advancement budget items that they insist they need.
Right.
Okay? And they have to have those, and if they don't get those, then they're gonna have to fire people, okay? So last year, I would have to look this up, but last year, I believe the request was for about 2,100,000, and we ended up funding about 1,800,000, okay? So it's a sure bet in my brain that
It makes sense, yeah.
that the school committee will present us with advancement budget part 3 for a substantial sum, and they're going to need, anyway, so this is my guess.
No, it makes sense.
All right?
Thank
This
you.
is- Anyway, this is the number I used
Yep.
last spring when I wrote that we were going to be
Yeah, I
up to 2.2 million in debt.
Right.
Okay? So I figured I might as well be consistent, and since I don't know a different answer, is to use that number. So that's where that number is coming from. And you know, maybe the advancement budget is not going to have a part 3, and the number will come in at 1,700,000. But, and that would be interesting. I kind of like what the school department has been doing with their advancement budget. I just wish that their budget request wouldn't generally be larger than all of our new tax revenue. It puts the squeeze on the rest of the town. It puts, it advances the schools, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be, but it advances the schools, say, against other interests like drivable roads, you know. But this is our job. This is how to balance all this stuff. And so the first thing, in my opinion, is that you gotta put it all on paper, give it your best stab, and see what it looks like, so that you know the size of the problem you're wrestling with. I got Lee Michael, then I got Frank, and then I got Jonathan.
I require a little education on how an override works, who would call for it, and what the timing would be in relation to the spring town meeting.
Okay. I'm probably going to defer to Betty on this question, because I haven't been through one of these. I really don't know.
Well, the selectmen have to call for an override, so it's ultimately up to them, but it always, historically, has gone before town meeting, and we've always had vigorous debates about the pros and cons of it. But then if an override is called for, typically a committee will form of citizens in town who will advocate for the needs and try to educate people about, you know, what the impact will be if the budget, you know, doesn't happen, where the cuts will come. But typically, there's like a little political group that gets together to kind of advocate. And there sometimes is a committee that advocates against the override as well. But typically, it has to be called for by the selectmen. But you'll see a lot of citizen input into that discussion with the Board of Selectmen, the school committee comes, and other departments come, because typically people in town try to gather together as a unified front when we're doing an override to say, this is for the good of the town, you know, for all the departments. But I would say, you know, if I had to be honest about it, I think typically the school parents are the ones that are the major players, if you will, in helping an override pass. At least that's been the history, in my history anyway.
Well, I mean, the school is the biggest budget in town. I don't know, 85% of it is labor.
Correct.
And when you can't meet the budget, then bodies hit the floor. And so that's the problem. And then, you know, the corollary arguments are guess what? The reason your property values keep going up is because you've got a high-performing school. So.
But what about the timing? Because
the timing is crucial. I don't know a lot of this stuff. Okay, I will tell you right off the bat. I don't know. Okay.
It just seems like we would end up spending money before we would actually vote on an override for the money we were spending.
No,
Well,
the way it happens, I believe, is that we will have to develop a contingent budget, one that reflects life. Well, two budgets. One for if the override doesn't pass, and therefore how much pain are we sharing over which departments? Okay, and more. Well, that's complicated too, and probably more complicated is, okay, if we do have an override, how much is it, and which departments are getting that, and for what reason? So there's a lot of discussion. There will be a lot of that will begin with what we ask the departments for. You know, like, okay, gee, police department, if you had to sustain a 2% reduction in your budget, how would you do it? Okay, things like that. So yeah, this could be a lot of work. But I'll try and keep it moving. But as far as the actual timing of these things goes, I don't know. I think this is day number one, right today, and I didn't advertise it to the selectmen, but I've got to get this committee moving. So that's what we're doing. That isn't very complete or helpful. Sorry.
So it does sound like we may have to develop two budgets And, okay, but my original question was, you have all the revenues as no increase, for instance, Chapter
Sure.
70 money and so forth.
Sure.
What's the projection on that? Do we have any idea what the state is doing?
I really don't. This is why I left the previous year in there, so that people can say, look at local receipts, okay? And if you look at the local receipts, you'll see that, gee, the gap from one year to the next was 200,000, all right? And if we can get another 200,000, that'd be great, okay? But that's not going to solve our problems. State aid, okay, if you look at the difference in let's see, the easiest line to look at for state aid is on the 3rd page, all right? The difference between 14 and 15 is pretty substantial, another $280,000 or so, okay? Sorry, page 3 of the budget worksheet, revenues, total state aid. In 14, we got 9,489,000. In 15, we got 9,769,000. That's actually looks a little richer than, I mean, that's distorted.
I understand.
Because if you look at your expenses, the assessments from the state went up too, okay? So the assessments went up, oh geez, from 14 to 15, they went up, let's see if I can, who's good at this, real quick. The assessments went up
150.
about 150. So our big gain of 270 from the state on the revenue side was offset by, say, 150 on the expenditure side. So, gee, if we could get another 200,000 out of local revenue, and if we could get another 200,000 out of the state, that'd be great. But it's not gonna tilt the balance. Now, if we get those things, see, last year we got those things. We got $2 million in free cash, and we had the great good fortune of a far better experience with our group insurance budget. It came in at 1.1 million less than previously projected. Okay, that's not going to happen again. So sure, we could get another 400,000 out of local revenue and state, and we might get fortunate and get more money out of free cash or something like that. But I think we have to start thinking about it as if we're not. Now, we're not going to have time to come back to this subject probably until, well, certainly until we get the warrant produced. But I did want to have an opportunity to get this introduced, so that we can come back to it after, probably towards the end of September. I got Jonathan and then Richard.
Just a quick question, what are your assumptions on the group insurance? It's on the
Group insurance, I took straight from the budget that was submitted last year that said, okay, this is how every budget has a forecast for the following year. That's where I got that number. I didn't make any assumption except to take the town accountant's assumption. And with the other number in that group that went up, that was straight from the
So the retirement is a harder number, the projected increase, is that a harder number than the projected increase in health insurance? Because you said that there's a three-year study.
Yes,
review.
that number will not change by $1.
All right.
Okay, whereas there is a chance that the group insurance number could change.
One way or the other.
And that would be scary because it's a big number and a small percentage could go a big distance either way. So, I don't know, this is just an intro to, where we stand and what we're gonna be dealing with. Paul? Oh, sorry, Richard?
Oh, I was just going to make a comment, and obviously this isn't news, but one of the other issues is the difference column where you've pulled money out from last year. Just in the last 2 years that I've been here, obviously that money was given to make departments whole on things that they really needed so technically
Okay.
there may be more things that people need, which
Right.
would put us
This is-
deeper in.
This is actually the money that you see, the difference there.
Yeah.
That was taken out. Those were for
The one-time.
one-time items, not money, for instance. Oh, one of the weird things about asking people for a level budget.
Was where I'm going with that.
Okay. One of the weird things in the past 4 years, when you ask somebody, say, the central business office for a level dollar budget, okay? Well, you can't, so what they do is they say, sure, okay? And then they go, well, let's see, my salaries are going up $10,000, so now I have to take $10,000 out of my general expenses in order to achieve a level dollar budget, okay? And then you say to yourself, well, this isn't really a equitable treatment between, say, the school department that doesn't comply with a request for a level dollar. So, gee, I wonder if we can find the the 10,000 or whatever it is to put back in that person's budget after they've given us a level dollar budget. So that was an exercise that was done for about 4 years anyway. And as the labor contracts weren't up to date and everything became an estimate and the money was put into a set aside instead of being projected within that department's budget, then the sacrifice they made in terms of accommodating a pay increase was a false sacrifice, because the pay increase was really contained within the set-aside article and not within their own department budget. So the sacrifice to achieve a level dollar budget was smaller, and therefore the remedy was easier. But it made sort of the accounting of it all much more difficult. So I am hoping and praying that all the contracts are up to date, and that when we get budgets, they will contain all the current costs and projected costs. So the negatives you see in the difference column are simply for things like the assessor's office. There was a sick pay buyback of $20,000. Well, that was...
What I was getting to is what exactly you just explained.
Right.
We're starting out already not being able to do that.
Right. So these negative numbers are just things like, the library, we gave them $25,000 for computers on a one-time basis. I don't know if we can do that again.
Exactly.
But it's not part of their regular operational budget, so I'm taking it out. Okay, that just so, if you look at these appropriation numbers, from 15, and you go, what the hell, why aren't these exactly the same? That's the answer. So, I don't know. Any other questions, Kevin?
That letter that we talked about, you and the town administrator send,
Right.
you talked to Anne Marie about it?
Not yet. I also I'm hoping to redesign the budget worksheet that comes at us, the first page especially, because I think one of the challenges to this committee, I certainly found, was that you get a number that says appropriation from last year. Well, that number is actually the combination of 3 different appropriations from 3 different articles, often, okay? And then perhaps there was a reserve fund transfer and maybe some 3% end of the year transfers. I want to see it all on the same page for each department. So I want to talk to them about redesigning that a little bit so that we don't have to go chasing for that kind of information to see what we think. Steve?
Yeah, that $6 million worth of water work is kind of a little unhappy surprise, and I'm hoping we might be able to get a presentation from the chair of the capital planning committee, or maybe Kevin, but I don't want to stick it on Kevin, to walk us through what their process is for determining how they prioritize these things and what else is sitting out there in the in the wings as far as stuff that could be coming at us, because we make decisions for this year, but they have fallout in future years too, and it doesn't make any sense for us to not have a good idea of what they're looking at. I mean, right now we're paying generationally high infrastructure bills on the schools, and that's going to start to taper off, and there may be opportunity to do some other stuff, just by sequencing it. And I want to make sure that they're thinking of that kind of stuff, so.
Oh, I think
we can get them in.
I think that's important. I think I don't have time to do that until the end of September. But that absolutely we need to know. We need to know that that's being looked at, and that's the opportunity for fire station rehabilitation, or maybe actually bringing the roads up to, I don't know, Dedham levels. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, no, we should do that, and I'm sure we can get that done. I think their schedule for departmental requests was moved up this year, so that they're going to have a quicker handle on what the requests are for the future. So I don't know. Are we ready to go to minutes, or does anybody have any other questions? Man. Let's go to the minutes. You all got these emailed to you, so we will. I will get my face out of the way here.
This was the last meeting of the last fiscal year.
Okay.
A lot of people won't be here.
June 19th, last year. I don't even remember how long this one went, but I don't think it was very long.
The minutes themselves, 3 pages. Because this was when we approved all the minutes from us.
Right. We're going to try and do a better job this year of staying on top of the minutes. But part of what occurred last year was that unfortunately Trish had to have her knee replaced, so we lost our valuable secretary for a couple of months.
I wrote my name right out into the
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much.
Works well though, doesn't it?
It does.
All right. Sorry about that. But at any rate, that's one of the reasons we had a backup on the minutes. And probably the other main reason was because our meetings went so long and the list got so big that I would just put it off. So, my fault. Anyway. So I don't know who's here that's not at. Okay. Anyway, I would take a motion from someone who was here.
So moved.
You need a motion first.
So
I move to accept the minutes as written.
okay, and a
Second.
second. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? You can only vote
If you were present
if you were
for
present, actually. So there, I don't know how many of us.
I'm not going to say. It's officially filed.
Okay, and the rest of you abstain automatically. Okay, great. So now we'll have.
That was the 39th meeting? Did I
Well,
notice that?
39th meeting, because 6 of them were town meetings, town meeting nights. So we actually only had 33 here. So
We meet before the town meeting.
Yeah,
yeah, we meet before the town meeting, usually for 15 minutes.
very good.
So
Chair, move adjourn.
Okay. Now, I know this was a quick one. No. 9:30 again. Well, hey.
Go for it.
I make a motion to accept the meeting, the minutes as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
And you have the balance.
Yep.
Okay. That brings us to the end of our agenda.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second it.
What about the next meeting?
The next meeting will be Monday.
Okay.
The next meeting will have a lot of articles. Monday was on the schedule.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we have to use it. It will have a lot of articles. The chair of the Board of Selectmen, Katie Conlon, will be coming in, and we will have the planning department here as well. Alex Whiteside, head of the planning board, and Will Clark, the town planner. And we will go through about 15 articles, I hope. So, anyway, all in favor of adjournment? Excellent. Thank you very much.